I just want to talk just for a couple minutes. The theme of what I want to share with you is it takes all of us. It takes all of us. You know, I watch, when you watch horses run, they wear blinders. And they wear blinders for a couple of reasons. One, they don't want to get distracted of what's going on to the left and right. And also, they don't want to panic. So when a horse races, it has a blinder so it can look straight ahead and focus on just what's happening straight ahead, not looking to the left or right. I really feel that we, the church, have our blinders on when it comes to sex trafficking. There are 9,000 massage parlors in America. 9,000. That you and I drive by in Memphis and South Haven and Houston and Buffalo and Niagara Falls and Detroit. We see them in strip malls. A tanning business here, a burrito business here, and there's a massage parlor. And we have our blinders on, and we don't either want to think about what's really going on in there, or we've got other things to focus on. Today, I want to encourage you, this is the time for the church to take the lead on the second largest illegal activity in the world next to drugs, a $99 billion a year industry. A child is kidnapped, and that child brings between $40,000 and $60,000 to their pimp a year. And we have our blinders on. It's the fastest growing crime in the world. The massage parlors, the 9,000 across America, generate somewhere between $2 and $3 billion. There's been an 800% increase in reported child sex trafficking over the last 10 years. And we have our blinders on. It's interesting is I'm not the biggest animal lover, right? Those who know me know I'm not. But we've had pets in our house for 35 years because I've been married for 35 years, and I say, yes, ma'am, right? Do you know there's 13,000 animal shelters in America? Do you know there's 600 beds in America for someone who's rescued from sex trafficking? Let that soak in just for a minute. Nothing against animal shelters. There's 13,000 animal shelters in America. And there's 600 beds as of today that if you rescue somebody from being trafficked, there's 600 beds that they can go sleep in and get to be ministered to. That's got to change. We have got to lead that change. Today, I'm ready to take my blinders off. I pray that when you leave here, your blinders come off too. So why did my blinders come off, and when did it start to click for me? About 6 years ago, my wife and I heard a 4-week message on orphans. We had 3 children. We were about to become empty nesters. In our mid-50s, we decided to go adopt a female from an Asian country to do our part in stopping trafficking of girls who get aged out through the orphan system. Well, she had a sister. So as Emma says, the youngest says, well, Dad, you buy one, you get one free. It didn't work that way. We didn't buy anything, but there were some dollars that were moved around, right, to do what we had to do. But when I went to that orphanage in Taiwan, I asked them, what happens when a young lady ages out? And they say they go front door. We give them clothes and the monies they have, usually $300 to $400. I said, no, you didn't answer the question. What happens to them when they get aged out? They say, we tell you. They go to the front door. And these traffickers, they have people, they scout these orphanages, and then they text each other, hey, one's at the front door. They're walking down the street. And then someone comes in, they groom them. If you don't know what I mean about grooming, you'll probably learn a lot more by the end of the day. And it starts that quickly. Church, we've got to take our blinders off. When we adopted Elise and Emma, that year I helped lead a Christian music festival called Kingdom Bound up in New York. At Six Flags, very large Christian music festival. And I was walking down, and someone had saw a video about 8 Days of Hope that we have rebuilt 5,500 homes after natural disasters, $50 million of work. And, and she came up to me and she says, my name is Julie Palmer. I lead an organization called PATH, People Against Trafficking Humans. And I believe that God wants me to speak to you. Okay? Have you ever thought about what 8 Days of Hope can do with their volunteer base to help out sex traffic victims. Well, I really haven't. I know a little bit about it because we just adopted these two precious girls last year from Taiwan. And so, yes, I'm becoming more aware of it. And that's how God connected the dots. She educated me, and we spent time with her. And at some point, we'll tell you how we're going to aid her. And the last story I want to share is how my blinders came off. I'm going to change his name in the state because I don't have his permission to use his name this morning. I couldn't get a hold of him, but I'm going to say Tom. I talked to Tom. Tom is a father. And something happened 3 years ago in 6 days that has forever changed his life. So Tom's daughter graduates high school, and she decides to go to Panama City, to beach, with a newer friend that she had only met about 6 months ago. And she goes down there, and her father and mother are very protective and, stay in contact. And they didn't know that someone had befriended her over the last 18 months through Snapchat, social media. Social media is being used by these traffickers like you would never even understand. It is crazy. So anyways, a false ID, a false person developed on a social media site befriends this young lady. And long story short, he knows she's at Panama City, and he kidnaps her. Father, the next day, doesn't hear from his daughter. He starts to panic. Something's up. And the lady she went to the beach with called him and said, Tom, your daughter and I went out last night. Someone picked us up. We went to a couple clubs, and I don't know where she's at. This guy had deep connections in Washington, D.C., and realized that he had to move very quickly. He knew that his daughter had been kidnapped. And so he used some legal and illegal methods. He hired a team of 6 Black Ops, Green Beret type people. I was going to find out that detail. He wrote a big boy check to them and said, find my daughter. They found her 6 days later. When they found her, they found the gentleman who had kidnapped her. I'm not going to go into too many details, but these 6 people that he hired threatened the young man with his life, that they needed to find out where she was, and if he didn't do it, something very evil would happen to him. He made a phone call. Tom found his daughter at a Kroger parking lot, just wearing panties, no other clothes. 6 days after his homecoming queen of their high school at a Christian school is kidnapped. She's strung out on heroin. And she has 6 tattoos over her body, including her neck and her face. They had branded her. She was under 21 at the time, and so, of course, he took her to the hospital, and she was there for 2 days, and they did all they can to do medically. And then at that point, they said, we've done all we can. You need to take her home. He said, what home? They know where she lives. She doesn't feel safe in her own home. We can't take her home. Where do I go? 38 states in America do not have a place for someone under the age of 21 who's been trafficked to stay more than when they get their medical attention. And I think today, by the end of the day, you're going to hear many opportunities for you to take your blinders off, for your church, your business, for you personally to invest your time and the resources God's blessed you with to make a difference. Church, it's time to take our blinders off. This young man started now a national movement, and he is on the board of an organization that we will be announcing here in a couple seconds that we're going to support. And they have the largest facility in the country, 48 beds. 48 beds. Outside a major city where 48 beds wouldn't even put a baby touch on the big issue that is happening right now. Here's the killer to the story that breaks my heart. The gentleman that had kidnapped his daughter goes to court, and he wasn't even sentenced a day in jail. He got fined $10,000. Tom was in the court. The guy didn't know Tom was in the court. They went out to the lobby. Tom was ready to take things in his own hands. As a father of 3 daughters, I would be tempted to do the same thing. He was fined $10,000. He was waiting for the guy to come outside. The guy makes a phone call. Within 10 to 15 minutes, a guy shows up with a briefcase. $10,000 in cash to pay his fine. Check. Back to business. We've got to take our blinders off, church. 38 states, nowhere to go. I'm just about done, but I was asking God the question after that third touch of what's going on in the country. You can't ignore it. And I remember just driving down the road by myself, and when I'm by myself, I pray and I talk to God and I try to listen. I'm not the best listener, but I try to listen. But I asked him a simple question. God, where are you in all of this? Where are you in all of this? And I heard loud and clear, no, where are you in all of this? Eight Days of Hope is announcing a new arm of the ministry. We are going to help ministries that are ministering to those who are brokenhearted and have been rescued from the most horrendous crime, I believe, that is known to mankind. Our commitment as an organization is that we're going to continue to do natural disasters, and we're not changing who we help and what we do, but we're adding to the plate. We have leaders, 152 volunteer leaders who are passionate about taking their blinders off and making a difference. Our commitment is simple. You go to our website under What We Do, click on that, and you'll see Safe House Construction. Any ministry in the country that needs assistance, rebuilding a facility, updating their kitchen, adding something, or building brand new, we will provide 35 skilled professionals for 14 days at no charge. Today, we're ready to announce that our first one will be in the city of Houston, Texas, the fourth largest city in the country, and long suspected as being either the number one or number two city in America for sex trafficking. We will be partnering with an organization called Elijah Rising. Ricky and Glenda Russell from Kentucky will be our day-to-day leaders. They'll be supported by Chris Childs, Dan Garrick, Adam Haynes, myself, Wayne Van Lanham, and many others. But our goal is to help, before the end of the year, Houston and Elijah Rising, and an organization called The Refuge in Austin, Texas. After that, we are looking at Indianapolis. We will be partnering with Frank and Linda Reich, head coach of the Indianapolis Colts, and their foundation called Ascent 121. And we also will be serving an organization in Buffalo, New York called PATH, People Against Trafficking Humans. Our goal is simple. We would like to do 2 of these before the end of the year to help these ministries expand their facilities. The goal is in 2020, at some point, we start doing 1 a month. Every month, somewhere in the country, 8 Days of Hope, partnering with a ministry to take these 600 beds and blow it up in a positive way. So 38 states. If a church says we want to be on the front line or ready to take off our blinders, we can support that church in the efforts. So if you know anyone that leads a ministry that provides safe houses across the country, share our website, share the page. There's a simple application. For more details, you can go to our website. Finally, I just want to say this. I'm going to introduce the next speaker in a minute, David Ball with Anchor Church, Grace and Mercy Ministries. Hope I didn't mess it up, David. Known David a long time. 8 Days of Hope is coming to Tupelo, Mississippi to partner with Grace and Mercy to build a facility right here in Northeast Mississippi. So there's no reason why you can't be a part of solving and ministering to what I think is the most horrific crime known to mankind. What is God calling you to do? You ready to take your blinders off? It's not a fun topic to talk about. We left that orphanage. There were 300 girls still sitting there. Those are my daughter's friends. I'm not blind to think that all of them are being sex trafficked, but I'm also not blind to think that not one of them have been aged out and are being mistreated. We are better than that. Church, it's time to be the church. If you belong to a church in Northeast Mississippi, I don't care what church is leading the charge. I love my brother, but it's time for First Baptist, Hope, St. James, West Jackson, inner city, outer city, ethnic, it doesn't matter. This is the time for us to take the lead. We are going to do our part.
A lot of you know my story. My story, I came out of a coaching. I was a basketball coach at Tupelo High School for 6 years. During that time, God used me as traveling and speaking and doing youth revivals. And I was seeing, a lot of souls being saved, a lot of my players being saved. I was reaching out to a whole lot of people to minister through coaching. And in that time, as a basketball coach, football coach in Alabama and Mississippi. And I was on the steps and in Alabama, through a series of events, God was pressing on my heart that it's time for me to walk out of a career. Guys, I thought I would be buried behind a gym somewhere. I never wanted to not coach. I was intense. As an athlete, I was intense. As a coach, and I loved my job as a coach. I loved working and watching boys grow to men. That was, one of the most beautiful things. I would get them in the 8th grade, 7th grade, and junior high, and I'd watch them grow to seniors and 18-year-olds going out. A lot of those guys are still calling me today. A lot of them call me Pop. A lot of them call me Dad because I was the only father figure in their life. And so I loved it. I loved my profession. But I heard, not an audible voice, but I heard the voice of God say to me in Sylacauga, Alabama, sitting on the steps. He said, "David, do you love me?" And I said, "Yes, Lord, I love you." He said, "Do you love me more than coaching?" And I said, "God, you sound like my wife." "Yes, Lord, I love you more than coaching." And he said, "I want you to give it up. I want you to walk away from it." 385 wins. 27 college basketball players, successful career. I'd just been appointed to a committee of 8 basketball coaches for the rules committee for the nation. My career was right in the middle of it, 40 years of age, and just excited about that career. And God said, "Walk away from it, lay it down, give it up." I sat down on some steps and I said, "God, I can't make this mistake. If it is a mistake, I can't just be emotional about this and walk away from a career that I'm successful in to do something that I know about. You're going to call me into the pastorate. You're going to call me to preach. I'm a PK. My dad was a pastor for 40 years. I know what that entails. I would rather have teenage boys than adults any day. So God, if this is what you have for me, then I got to know. I got to know. And in that moment, the Holy Spirit just pressed on my heart. I got a phone call, and that phone call was just God saying, "This is what I want you to do." And my wife came home, and I thought I was visiting a shocker. And I said, "Look, I feel like God's called me in full-time ministry." And she said, "I didn't know when this day was coming, but I knew it was coming." I was like, wow, we should have let me in on it. This is a shocker. This is a shocker to me. And so at that moment, God began to do something. And I sat down and I said, "Okay, God, if we're going to do this, this is what I'm asking." It's my fleece. And please, I don't want you to question my theology in this, all right? But this was my fleece that I threw out. I said, "Okay, God, if you're calling me to babysit a congregation, please leave me in coaching. If I'm just going to have church, just leave me alone. Let me coach. I'm seeing kids saved. I'm doing ministry. But God, if you want to do something supernatural that man can't explain nor take the credit for, I'm your man. God, if you want to ask to do the difficult, what nobody wants to do, I'll do it, God. I'll step out and I'll do it. But let's do something big." I forgot those words. God didn't. He didn't. So when I went into ministry, and I went into traditional ministry, traditional church, and I started saying to the church, "Guys, we got to get outside the walls. This is what God didn't call us to attend church." Do you know the most important event in a Christian's life doesn't happen on Sunday morning? It's what we do from Monday to Saturday that impacts the world. The church is not impacting the world. We're just wanting to build a drawbridge around a congregation. And we say, God, protect us from the evil outside. And he said, I am the light. I am the salt. I've called you into the world. I said, okay, God, I'm buying in. I want to do this. Well, guys, it didn't take long for me to realize traditional church doesn't want to do this. It didn't take me long to say that when you start challenging people at the very core, I'm talking about the very core, that say, hey, it's not about being comfortable. Matter of fact, the more uncomfortable you are, probably the closer to the will of God you are. Okay. And so what God began to tell me was, you got to do something else. You got to get outside the wall. God gave me a vision. The vision was provide help, hope, and healing to hurting people. Now, I don't tell many people this, but I think this morning is very important, so I'm going to share this with you. The way God did that for me, he opened my ears and I began to hear people crying for help. People would sit there telling me something inside, and literally I would be listening to what they're saying, but inside of them, I'm hearing them crying for help. I would hear people be angry at me, and inside I heard them crying for help. At that point, I said, okay, God, what do we do? What does it look like to provide help, hope, and healing to hurting people? What does that look like? So I ended up in Sarasota, Florida. I ended up with a pastor friend of mine named Jim Miner. He had been in ministry for 28 years, and he had a street ministry, and he ministered to people on the street. He had a traditional church in Miami. He moved to Tampa, right outside of Tampa in Sarasota. And through a series of events, he invited my wife and I down to Sarasota, Florida, the most beautiful beach in the world, for a week to find out what they do as far as ministering help, hope, and healing to hurting people. I said, of course, we'll go to the beach 7 days, right? We'll go down there. God wrecked me in the most beautiful way. Because all of a sudden, I began to see my people, the ones God's called me to. For the first time in my life, I realized there are people everywhere crying for help. So we started ministry. Jim Miner said, you have to render people unto the Lord. He used that illustration of the lawyer trying to trap Jesus. The way he tried to trap Jesus was about taxes. Remember that? Should we pay our taxes? He says, yes, then everybody get mad and walk out. If he says no, the Roman soldiers would come and carry him out, right? They thought they had him trapped, and he said, whose image is on that coin? Caesar's. He says, well, render unto Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and we use that to be good citizens, which we ought to be, which we ought to support our nation, our leadership, and make sure we do everything that we can to push our nation in the direction God's called us to. But we leave out what is inferred in that passage. Because he said, and unto the Lord that is the Lord's. But he was repeating the same statement. He was saying, and render unto the Lord that bears the Lord's image. 2 words there. Lord's image and render. So what I felt in my heart God was saying to me is there are people that you have to render unto the Lord. And what I mean by that is inviting them to church isn't rendering them anywhere. When you render somebody, you have to physically remove them out of the circumstances, situation, environment they are in, place them into a healthy place that they can be offered the healing of what God has. In my office, there's a picture. There's several things in my office. And when I heard this, I say, okay, God, we got to render people unto the Lord. You got to look at people that are in unhealthy situations, and you got to provide a safe place. In recovery ministry, we have terms that we use all the time. People, places, things. If you've got a life that needs a radical change, then things have to change radically if you're really going to change. So we talk about people, places, things. You've got to remove those people from your life, the places that you used to go. And all of these things are what we found in jail ministry with Larry Reed at First Baptist Church in Corinth. And we had this conversation, jail ministry. You go to guys, they genuinely accept Christ. But when they get out, they go back into the same environment, back into the same places. And it's like that Chinese water torture. It's constant dripping, and it's constantly around them. And the apartments that they can afford to go into, when they walk into that apartment, they're watching 3 or 4 drug deals take place on their way into their apartment. We said, God, we got to do something. So our church did. We planted a church. Last thing Tupelo needed was another church. You can't throw a rock in Tupelo without breaking a stained glass window. For 8 months, I told everybody around me, I said, we need to plant a church. We need to plant a church. No, we don't need to plant a church. We don't need another church. We just need the churches in Tupelo to get started ministering help, hope, and healing to hurting people. What I realized was, get me straight on this because I don't want to be offensive, but I do want to disturb you just a little bit. So can I walk that fine line just a second? Pastors, if they just automatically change their church radically, they're probably going to get run off. The traditional church can't handle my church. What I mean by that is, if I say everybody in here's got in my church on Sunday morning, I've done this. Everybody in here been to jail, has a criminal record, stand up. Man, we've got 80% of our church standing up. We've got tattoos and piercings all over the place. And you know what? We're worshiping and having a great time. You know why? Because they want to be a part of a church that's providing help, hope, and healing to hurting people. And it's beautiful to me. I've got people that have been in church their whole life sitting next to a guy that's got the artwork from the top of his head to the soles of his feet, and they're sitting there talking and admiring each other's artwork. You know, and it's like, what artwork? Well, you know, he painted a house or something, and that was the artwork he was admiring, and he painted his body, and they're changing. Listen to me carefully. What God began to do is he began to show us how to minister help, hope, and healing. We planted the Transformation Ranch for drug facility for people to recover from drug addiction. We then started the Transformation Garden for girls that are fighting drug addiction. Home, Transformation Home. Now we're going to the Transformation Garden, which is what Steve's a part, and that's why we're here. But let me tell you how we got there real quick. Here's how we got there. I'm a man, and Steve and I share one common trait. Both of our hearts have been broke by Jesus. And I weep with you, brother. So, and I will whip any man that questions my masculinity, so let's get this. But at the time, let me explain something to you. My heart began to be broken. Why? Because I'm ministering to these girls and these men, and I'm hearing their stories. I started sitting down with these girls that were coming out of a lifetime of addiction. And I'm the first man that they've trusted in their life to share a lot of these stuff with, and I don't take that lightly. For some of them, I'm the only father that hasn't hurt them. For some of them, I'm the only person that's genuinely given them unconditional love without expecting anything in return. They have no idea what that looks like from a man. And they start telling me their story. And I started hearing them cry. And I started hearing cries of their past. When they would talk about being chained to a bed for 17 days in a row while men would run into them to pay their drug debt off. Hear the stories of being molested and raped as children, innocent children, babies. And they started telling me about nights that they would be in different places and they would be crying for help, begging for God to send somebody to help them. And that was the cries of helps that I've been hearing for a long time. People in addiction, people in pain, people bitter and angry. And then a pain in my heart came when I realized what I was doing when these girls were crying for help. I was coaching basketball and attending church. I was attending church. I was bragging about the fact that I was faithful to my wife, and I went through a whole season without cussing any official or a player out. I thought that was a major accomplishment. And God was saying to me, I'm calling you into some difficult places to do those difficult things that no one else will do. But they will be very angry at you because it will reveal their own shortage. See, we have a choice. When God gives us a message, we receive the message and then respond to it. Or we can't get angry at God, we get angry at the messenger. And a lot of times we do that. We get angry at the messenger because the message is challenging us to the core. So what God is calling us right now, and He's speaking to us in a major way. And He's saying, you got to do something. You got to do something. And Lee, I didn't get your permission before, but would you just stand up for just a second so I can put a face to this just for a second, okay? Now, this is a lot of you don't know her, and I'm just going to tell you just how big God is. My heart starts getting broken. I don't know what to do, but my heart starts getting broken And God has called me to preach all over the world. I've been in China and Philippines and doing great and incredible things that God calls us to in evangelism, right? Come home. And on my flight home from Cuba, and watched a great move of God, but I'm ready. 4 kids and a beautiful wife that I'm ready to get home to see. And we land, and the first thing they tell us is we got a 7-hour delay. And I'm like, 7 hours? I'm ready to get home to my wife and my kid. And I get mad. I know, see, you think preachers are supposed to be perfect. I'm being transparent with you right now. And I say I was not just upset. I was mad. 7 hours in the airport. It's not one. I hate those things, okay? So I'm sitting in that airport, and I'm sitting down, and Kim Edwards is sitting over there, part of our mission team that went to Cuba, and she's sitting over there, and her and Lee strike up a conversation. I'm still mad, okay? So I'm not listening much to the conversation, and I'm just sitting back, and then all of a sudden Lee talk about a way out ministry where she helps in a ministry for those that have been sex trafficked. So I sit up. Didn't want to be real nosy, but I lean in, and she starts sharing about this ministry. And so at this point, my flesh is dying out, where my spirit is overtaken. Y'all ever been in those moments where you got to die to your flesh, okay? And my flesh is beginning to die, so the Spirit of God can take over and begin to really speak. And listen, Holy Spirit starts doing an incredible thing. He starts pounding away at my heart, and my heart is just pounding as I start listening to her share. And she went into her personal story, and she begins to share. And I'm like, and Kim says, David, are you listening to this? I said, yes, she had me at hello. She had me at hello. And then we start sharing our vision, and she starts sharing the need for beds. And I came back, and I told Warren, he's our director of Grace and Mercy Ministries, and I said, Warren, we got to do something. And everybody in our church and everybody in our ministry, I get this look in my face, and I start crying when I say I got to do something. And that's when they start really getting nervous.
Amen.
Because they know it's fixing to be work for the church and for everybody involved. It's fixing to be some work. And so we started making phone calls because of your heart in sharing. God's just that the next hours flew by as we heard your heart for ministry, and we heard what was going on and the need. And I was like, already had, okay, this ear for the hurting people. And let me just say this to you. While all of this is going on that Steve's talking about and everything that's going to be shared today, I want you to keep one thing in mind. What were you doing while this was happening? While this was going on in the lives of so many around the world, what were you doing when this was happening? Okay, that ought to, in turn, I believe this, passionate and compassionate people act. Before you ever act in passion, though, your heart has to be broken, and you become compassionate. So the initial step in ministry is when your heart is broken to the point it's shattered in pieces. You say, God, I can't go on with life anymore. You show me what to do and I'll do it. You just tell me what it is and I'll do it. I don't care what it is. And one of the things, the reason why God is entrusting us with this was because so many of us have walked away from what we knew to do what God's called us to do. I wouldn't trade my ministry and what God's called me to go back to coaching for the world. I wouldn't do it as much as I love coaching and as difficult as our ministry is. But the one thing that God is saying to us is, 1, what were you doing? 2, what are you going to do now? See, the first thing is your heart broken yet? Probably you've already had God prick your heart at the fact you're here. There is no way Steve might can. I don't believe I can. I don't believe, there's some people that maybe can impact a lot of pastors and preachers, but, I know a lot of preachers in Tupelo and everything, but you know how hard it is to get churches to come together, to set apart. I mean, don't get me wrong. Listen to me. I'm trying to maintain calm right now. This is composure for me normally, all right? This is composure from what I normally like. But one thing, we will argue theology all day long, but we won't walk across the street to a hurting person to share Jesus with them for a minute. We won't hug somebody that needs a hug. We won't do what God's called us to do. I was that guy. I would go preach in front of thousands. It didn't bother me. I preached the word of love, preaching the word of love, teaching. But my question is, will you share the love of Jesus? I'm not interested in your worship on Sunday. I'm interested in your life Monday through Saturday. I'm not really interested in your theology. I'm not into theology. I'm into my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, and a personal, intimate relationship with Him. I've been arguing theology a long time, and I thought I was doing good when I got my point across. But God hadn't called us to defend theology. God's called us to minister to hurting people. Your heart has to be broken. I know most of you wouldn't be here if your heart wasn't broken. But you need to be sharing with other people to get their hearts broken. Because once your heart is broken, at some point you got to act. You got to do something. And that's where we are right now. We were going to step out and do this ministry. You're going to hear a lot about it. We've got a budget to set up, and I sat here and looked at this and I was like, oh my goodness, every ministry we've ever stepped out by faith to do, God is blessed and honored. But now what God's calling us to is something bigger than the Anchor Church. God told me from the ministries of help, providing help, hope, and healing to hurting people, God was going to melt churches' hearts together. I don't believe that's going to be done from the top. I'm going to believe that's going to be done from the remnant of God's people. There's people inside of every single church that's hearts are broken over topics and subjects. And you can't just go sit in church anymore and just exist. And you got to do something. What I want is that compassionate heart, that broken heart, to turn to passion. Passionate people accomplish things in life. Their passion drives them. It drives them to step out of the comfortable into the uncomfortable. It causes them to step out on faith. It causes them to do things that man can't explain nor take the credit for. That's passionate people. But you never be acting with passion until your heart's been broken to the point that you can't breathe. Today, my prayer is your heart would be broken to that point. Not only that, but it calls you to act. When God moved me from the pulpit to the streets, always been in the pulpit, even as coach ball, I was preaching and teaching. But when God moved me from the pulpit to the streets, He used one thing. My wife sent me to Walmart, and I heard a sermon right before I walked into Walmart, and it was David Platt and Francis Chan having a conversation that they had on the airport coming back from the Passion Conference. And they asked each other, when's the last time you led somebody to the Lord outside of a church building? And both of them said, I can't remember. And David Platt asked Francis Chan, do you have a hard time sharing Jesus one-on-one? He said, I have the hardest time. I'll stand up in front of 100,000 people and preach, but walk up to one individual and talk to him scares me to death. From that conversation, I went, that's me. I've seen hundreds just got back from the Philippines. We had over 1,000 people get saved in the Philippines in 14 days. That's beautiful, right? Praise God. But God's not interested if I'm willing to go to the Philippines. He's interested if I'm willing to go to Walmart. And I walked in Walmart, and I come down this aisle, and I'm not a shopper. I mean, without cell phones, my wife wouldn't trust me in Walmart. My wife sends me a text message with a list. I still get it wrong. So I'm looking at my cell phone with this list, and I'm going down Walmart aisle, and I have to go about every one of them. I don't know why I can't pick. It's the last one, whatever it is I'm looking for. It's the last one. But it's a man thing because I won't ask anybody. I know they require people at Walmart to know every item that's in that store and where it's located. But no, I can find it. So I'm walking through Walmart, and I'm going down the aisle, and I come up, and this lady's coming towards me, and she's walking towards me, and she gets right real close to me. She gets real close to me. God says, pray for her. So I'm walking right down the aisle, and I get close to her, and I said, to God, please be with this lady that you're walking right here. Whatever's going on in her life right now, you just be with her in Jesus' name, amen. He said, David, that wasn't what I was talking about. I said, God, she's going to freak out. You're going to be a man walking up to her in Walmart. I mean, it's like I know church members will see their pastor talking to a woman in Walmart, and that will just all over rumor mills everywhere. All these excuses. I turned the next aisle. When I turned down the next aisle, guess who's walking? Strange thing. God says, pray for her. So God, I already did this. Got these items, and I'm busy, and I'm a pastor now, God. I can't just stop and pray with people. I've got to get back to Facebook and talk about Calvinism, Arminianism, important stuff like that. And here I go, and God just, boom, hammers away at me. And I turn, and I walk past her the second time, and I turn, and this is as vivid and as real as it happened just a few minutes ago. And the Holy Spirit pressed on my heart and said, last time. I don't think it was just the last time for that. I think it was the last time God was going to trust me with something of this nature, this big. So I walked up to her and said, ma'am, excuse me, but I just feel so pressing right now, God, that I'm supposed to pray for you. Is there anything I can pray for you about? Tears started rolling down her face, and she said, I'm just coming from the doctor, and I've been diagnosed with cancer, and they haven't given me long to live. I've come to Walmart to get my husband's favorite meal, and I'm going to fix it for him, and I'm going to tell him tonight. I didn't care anymore. I grabbed her, and I started hugging her, and we prayed. We had a time with Jesus. I took off a bracelet I had on, and I put it on her wrist, and I said, I want you to be reminded that God loved you so much that he demanded that a man pray for you to let you know. And God said, do you know how many, listen to me. It's a sweet story, but listen to this. Here's the tragedy. God said to me, do you know how many preachers and church members have walked past people I asked him to pray for that were in the same need? We can't walk past them anymore. I'm in the airports now, and I am a hawk. If I see a grown man with a little girl, I am a hawk. I'm following them around. Baby, is this your daddy? And I'm looking up at him. She really yours? Got a DNA test? Guys, we can't do this anymore. And listen, I don't know about you, but I'm done attending church. Don't get me wrong. I get paid to be there. So I'm going to be there. But as long as there's a breath inside of me, every message is going to be compelling people to get outside the church walls and minister help, hope, and healing to hurting people. That is not about, you can have your theology so square and you can be as straight as a gun barrel, but you can be just as empty. And it's time for us, the church, to step up to accomplish what God has said. And listen, I don't believe, I happen to be a pastor, but I don't believe this is coming from the pastors. I believe it's coming from the remnant that's going to unite hearts. And then the pastors will get on board. Eventually the pastors will get on board. I'm not giving up on pastors, Brother Terry. I see you, brother. But I believe God is calling us as individuals to use the gifts that he has for us to accomplish the kingdom work. Fist and take a break, and we're going to have some wonderful speakers for you the rest of this day. Incredible things are going to be going on today. Our stepping out and what God's called us to. You might have heard all kinds of crazy rumors about David Ball and the Anchor Church, and we just recently purchased First Baptist Church Verona. I encourage you to come find out what God is doing. Find out what God is doing. Just come and talk to me and share, because what God has called us to is to act on what he's broken our heart for. Just simply act on what God's broken our heart. Guys, we're not here to build a congregation. I told our church from the day one, we're not here to build a congregation. A congregation has grown around the kingdom work that God's called us to. It's a byproduct. It is. It's just a byproduct. We're not focusing on collecting members. And I'll close with this, and I'm going to introduce some good friends of mine and how that God has called them to step into ministry here in this area. Steve Gaines, a lot of you know him. He's the pastor of Bellevue Baptist Church, Memphis, Tennessee. He and I were having lunch, and he told me, He said, God's called us to be fishers of men, and we become keepers of aquarium. We're collecting fish. And what we do, something new happens in a church, and all the fish go run over there to that church. And that church gets old, and so then they go to the new thing, and we're just swapping fish from aquarium to aquarium. And we're not fishing like God called us to the hurting people. So God's calling us to get outside the walls. God's calling us to minister help, hope, and healing to hurting people. My prayer, God will break your heart, and you will become compassionate. And that compassion will grow to passion and cause you to act. And that's our prayer for today, in some way, shape, form, or fashion.
Thank y'all so much for having me today. I'm Lindsay Simmons with Mississippians Against Human Trafficking. And I'll just kind of start a little bit and tell y'all how I got here, and then we're going to talk about what human trafficking is and is not, and give y'all some time for questions. The Lord put human trafficking on my heart 7 or 8 years ago, and I distinctly remember where I was in my vehicle on the way to work. Something on K-Love came on about trafficking. I don't even remember what they were really promoting, and I just thought, I don't know about this, you know. So I get to work and I kind of Google a little bit the organization they had mentioned on K-Love and find out some information, and it's just really pressed into my heart. Well, the next day I got an email from a girl I had known sort of at church growing up. I have no idea how I got on her email list. I never subscribed to that email. She was 5 or 6 years older than me. We weren't really friends, but she was working with sex trafficking in Los Angeles. And then a few days after that, there was some other thing that came into my path, and I just thought, okay, Lord, I hear you. This is 3 times in 72 hours. I've never heard of this before. And the more I learned, the more I just got burdened about it. And for a long time, there wasn't anything to do. And I was kind of mad at the Lord. I'm thinking, you have put this horrific thing in my path, on my mind, and you've given me nothing to do, and I'm a doer. So what can I do? How can I fix this? Who can I talk to? How can I pray? What do I do? So for a long time, there was just nothing because there wasn't a lot going on in Mississippi. Then I found a company that made jewelry by women. They let women make jewelry who were rescued from trafficking. And so I sold jewelry for that company for a while, thinking this is a little bit of something I can do to help, And after I say I'm a recovering lawyer, and after I was a lawyer for a while, my husband was a lobbyist, and he hired me. So I get into lobbying, and before I even start, somebody contacted me, and she said, there's this bill they're going to try to pass next year. Will you help them? And my husband's like, this is fantastic. You haven't done 1 day's worth of paying work, and you're going to do some free work. Okay, that's great, Lindsay. So I'm like, sure, we can do this. So I got involved with some groups who were doing some legislation, and then I helped write a report that kind of assessed the need in the Jackson area for, or what was really going on with sex trafficking of children. So I say all that to tell you, you don't have to be somebody who goes out and rescues victims in the street. You don't have to be a pastor. You don't have to be able to build houses. But what is it that you do in your day-to-day life that can help this cause? So I just want you to be thinking about that. I lobby. I write grants. I do just teaching and training, things like that. That's what I can do. I don't work with victims day to day, but there's a need for everybody. So just be thinking, what is it that you do in your day-to-day life that can be used in this way somehow? So I'll just kind of start a little bit by telling y'all kind of what human trafficking is and what it is not. Have y'all seen the movie Taken that came out a few years ago? Lots of heads, some no's. I'll give you a really brief synopsis. College age, privileged white girl goes on study abroad because that's what you do, and you're supposed to do that, and it's a great learning experience. So she heads off with a friend overseas. When they get off the train or plane or whatever, some Middle Eastern nondescript ethnic person snatches them up and kidnaps them, chains them up, puts them in cages, and puts them on an auction block. At some point, the girl's friend dies, and there's not a lot of mention of that. Well, thankfully for this girl, her dad is Liam Neeson, and he is some CIA agent, and he starts tearing across the world, like killing everyone in his path to rescue her. And he gets to her, and he rescues her, and he leaves all the other girls in the cages, and they go home, and she gets a pony, and she's fine. And that's not human trafficking. It does not look like that. I've never heard a story like that. Every now and then, maybe that happens in some other countries. I don't know. That's not what we see here. What we see is a young girl who's run away from an abusive situation. She's on the street. A guy rolls his window down and says, you want me to take you for something to eat? You want some weed? You want a ride? And she says yes. and he drives her around the corner and sells her for $120 to a pimp. And that happens in Jackson every day. It's also not smuggling. You think of truckloads or carloads full of people packed in the back of a 18-wheeler, whatever it is, coming across the border. Well, that is smuggling. But smuggling is a crime against a country and its borders, and human trafficking is a crime against people. And sometimes it overlaps, but it's not the same thing. For trafficking to occur, you don't have to move at all. So the word is a little bit confusing. You think of drug trafficking and gun trafficking, moving guns and drugs across borders. You can be trafficked in your own home and not move at all. Or you can be trafficked in your home and go to school and come back home and seemingly choose to stay in that environment. It's also not just women and girls. That's the typical picture that we see. It is mostly women and girls. International groups estimate that 50% of traffic victims are boys, which is a really high estimate, but could be true. Our local guys in Jackson see 2 to 1, 2 females to 1 male that are being trafficked. So even if it's that percentage and not 50%, that's 30-something%. That's pretty high. So the problem with boys is they don't see themselves as victims. They're not. We don't teach them that like we do little girls. We don't teach them that they can be victims, so they don't see themselves as that. So sex trafficking, the legal definition of it, for what it's worth, is sexual services performed in exchange for something of value. And if you're under 18, that's all you have to prove. So a sexual service is sex, prostitution, pornography, illicit performances, anything sexually related in exchange for something of value. So something of value, your most common scenario is sex in exchange for cash, but it could be drugs, a room, a rent, a ride, anything, a Happy Meal. It could be anything. Anything you can place a value on if you exchange it for some sort of sexual service. If the victim is under 18, that is all you have to prove. So that you don't have to move, you don't have to be under someone's control or authority. That's all you have to prove. If you're over 18, you have to prove force, fraud, and coercion. So you have the sexual act in exchange for something of value with some element of force, fraud, or coercion. So a lot of times you'll see someone who consents to one thing, like they consent to driving out to Las Vegas for a modeling job, and when they get there, they're picked up and sold into some sort of trafficking. The consent obviously is revoked at that point. They're not consenting to that, so that's the fraud. There could be some sort of physical force, chains and bondage. You don't see that a lot. You mostly see emotional coercion, blackmail. Y'all mentioned grooming earlier. The men groom these women to think that they need them, they can't live without them, they're not worth anything, or they may be addicted to drugs. And so this is the only way they're keeping on getting their fix, and they usually do addicted to drugs very quickly. So if the victim is an adult, there's some level of force, fraud, or coercion. I'm tasked with telling y'all what's going on in Mississippi, so I'm going to try to focus on that. So last year, we were able to pass a law that says women under 18 can no longer be charged with prostitution. And we got some pushback on that. People said they can choose that. Some of them want to be prostitutes. And sometimes they do tell you that they want that. And my question is, why? What was their choice? If they chose to be a prostitute, what was their choice? And often you'll see that they are running from or leaving something worse. So there's almost always been some level of abuse, sexual abuse in the home. I mean, in the 90 percentile, you see trafficking victims who had some sort of abuse in their background. And they think, well, it's happening to me at home, so I can choose to do this on the street and get paid for it. Well, that's not really a good choice, And so we think if you're under 18, you're not going to be put in a detention center. Even if you want to do this, well, then when you're 19, you can go back and try again. But we're going to try to get you some services if you're under 18 and see what's wrong, what are you actually running from or trying to escape from. And that's federal law. Also, not all states have that law. Mississippi had some version of it, but we were still requiring minors some level of proof, and we don't want that. We don't want them to have to prove anything. We have statutory rape laws, and we were saying you can't consent to having sex, but we're putting you in jail for being a prostitute, which is a little bit contradictory. So got that straightened out last year. House Speaker Philip Gunn led the charge on that, and he's great. And he called us back after the legislative session last year and said, "What next?" And we never see that from politicians. They usually say, "That's a great bill. Check the box. Go home and tell my constituents how great I did." And I work with the legislature. We have a lot of great people down there. They're just not always followed through. They don't realize there's need. And Philip Gunn said, "What's next?" And so we've been meeting all summer to talk about what is next. What do we need legally to get Mississippi on the right track? And we have really good laws. Part of what we don't have is really good enforcement, and that's really nobody's fault. It's just a lack of education, which is why these kind of situations, these kind of forums are so important. We need our law enforcement and prosecutors and judges aware of what evidence is needed when they see one of these cases, how to prosecute them, and then how to punish the criminals. So working on all of that. We have currently one home for adults in Mississippi, and they can only house 6 women. It's a domestic violence shelter in Jackson, and they opened this home 2 years ago, and they're doing great stuff. They're always full with a waiting list. Looking really forward to having this home here that you guys are talking about. That'll be a great addition. We have nothing for children in this state. We have literally nothing. I'm pushing, and part of what our group's mission is to get housing for kids. So I'm really pushing our current group homes and foster groups because they're the ones who already know how to take care of children well. So I really want them to renovate some of their houses, and they love when I show up and tell them all the things they need to do. But we really want them to be the ones to take the charge on that. Our group is kind of to serve as an umbrella organization and bring everybody together. We don't want to start a group home. We don't think that's what we're qualified to do, but we do want to help facilitate other people doing that. So we're working on policy and procedure. We've talked to groups in other states and gotten a lot of good ideas. So we want to help facilitate that as well as we can. We do have 5 task forces around the state: Jackson, the Coast, Batesville, Tupelo, and Hattiesburg, and they're all working really well. What they do is it's a conglomeration of law enforcement and service providers. So it's FBI, NBI, local guys, and they work together on some of these cases. Sometimes they'll do reverse stings or ops and arrest people. Sometimes they're just sharing information. I sit in the meetings for the one in Jackson, and I love to hear them talk and just say what's going on, what cases they have. And then somebody will pipe up and say, "Hey," because it's confidential in the room, and they'll say, "Hey, the girl in that case, was that so-and-so?" And they're like, "Yeah, we saw her a couple of weeks ago, wherever." And it's great to see them be able to piece things together. Or you'll have a guy saying, "We got this one guy, we got this phone, we can't get into it. I don't know what we're going to do, we can't get the evidence." And the FBI guy always raises his hand and says, "Hey, get me that phone, I'll get it for you. I'll get it open for you." So it's really good to see them working together. With those task forces are rapid responders across the state, and Amanda Dollar is here. She is your rapid responder in Tupelo, and that's who you call when you suspect who law enforcement will call when they suspect one of these cases, and Amanda and the other women across the state will come and be the victim service advocate in that situation. So always call on them. U.S. Attorney Mike Hurst just started a human trafficking council, which is just bringing more awareness, bringing more people to the table, so we're glad to see that. We have last year's legislation put a human trafficking coordinator at MBI, which is the Mississippi Bureau of Investigation. Up until now, we've had no way of knowing how many cases we have, and this is really a hard crime to quantify. I mean, no one raises their hand and says, "Hey, put me down as a victim," or we can't quantify it. There's really no way to do that. But now we are going to start tracking these cases, and hopefully people with CPS and law enforcement will report to NBI. We'll start to get numbers, names, and we'll be able to make cases by seeing these cases, these people that are repeatedly reported and things like that. There's also supposed to be a coordinator at CPS. They haven't filled that position yet, but we hope that that person will create specialized multidisciplinary teams so that when a child victim is found, they go into a special track. They don't just get put in the mass of CPS to everyone else. They go into a special track. They're treated differently. They get services immediately, and then we follow them through the system. Because right now what's happening, you'll see a child who runs away from home. They get involved with drugs or some sort of crime. They get involved with trafficking, and they'll get arrested. Well, someone misses the trafficking part of it, and they arrest them for drugs or whatever it is. That child goes to a detention center. They'll stay a few days there. When they get out, they'll go into foster care or to a group home, and they'll run away from there because no one ever addressed their root cause of abuse or whatever it was they ran away from. So then they're back on the street. They go back to their pimp or their trafficker, and it's just a big cycle because they're not getting specialized services. So what we really hope to see is all these groups who provide services, let's come together and make sure these people get the treatment that they need so they're not just cycling in and out of the system. We do have something coming up that I would love for y'all to participate in. We're doing a statewide awareness day. So it's October 28th. And this video that I hope y'all can see, we have it cut down to 3 minutes. So we would love for like churches to show it, youth groups, that kind of thing. And then on Monday the 28th, write "no more" on your hand and like post something on social media that way. We just want to garner attention for this. We think this is the perfect time to do it because people are talking about it. It's not that it's trendy, but it's just becoming a thing, and we're all discussing it. So let's capitalize on that. And I mean, I think every state is doing something, but no one really seems to be doing it really well. And I would love to see Mississippi be a leader in something for once. You know, we have a lot of great people doing good work, so I want us to all come together. And like I said, just be thinking about what it is that you can do in your capacity. Like, you know, if you work in a dentist office, ask your dentist if they would see one trafficking victim a year for free, because they often come in with a lot of health issues. Or a doctor's office, would they just check somebody out and do a medical exam for free? These people don't have documentation. They certainly don't have insurance. They usually don't have their driver's license. Someone's holding all their, documents. So we need them to be seen quickly in those kind of situations. Tattoo removal, y'all mentioned the brands earlier. Plastic surgeons who remove brands. Any of that. Like, if you work in an office in an admin position, in a medical office, could you ask them if they would help these victims just once or twice a year? Because if everyone does it, then you don't have somebody coming every single day. We can all share the burden. What do y'all need to know? What questions do y'all have? Yeah.
I had the opportunity to share with you a proposed resolution for the Mississippi legislature. And thank you to Ann for the article that she co-authored on the cover of American Family Journal for the month of October on the issue of sex trafficking and what can be done about it. And thank you for your involvement in the legislation. Pornography is the big 800-pound gorilla in the room. People don't like to talk about it. Pastors don't like to address it in the pulpit. Sunday school teachers stay away from it. It's too touchy a subject, but it needs to be addressed. Pornography fuels and is the demand that creates the supply of women and children who are trafficked. They're going to speak on it.
Yeah.
And so what can we do about the 800-pound gorilla in the room?
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. Some people
Mississippi has the opportunity to join 15 other states that have passed resolutions that declare that pornography is a public health crisis.
Some people argue the pornography issue that it's not a driving factor, and I firmly believe that it is. Someone asked me the other day when I was speaking if trafficking, if it's new, is it growing? Prostitution and slavery have been around since the beginning of time. I mean, y'all are Bible church people in here, y'all know that. Those are the oldest crimes, some of the oldest things in the Bible. So no, it's not new. And I don't even know if it's growing as much as it's just that we're aware of it now, but pornography is fueling the fire. So with technology, 90% of human trafficking starts online somehow. So in my opinion, people are looking at pornography, and just like when you look for shoes on Google or Amazon or whatever, then you start getting ads for more shoes, right? Like, so your computer's tracking you and they know what you're looking for. So the same with pornography. So you're looking at something, well, then it starts advertising to you other things. And suddenly what you're looking at is not enough. And so you're looking at something kinkier or younger or with some sort of fetish. And I'm sorry if these words are uncomfortable. They're not uncomfortable for me. So you're probably going to hear a lot about sex today. They start targeting you with those kind of things. So then the pictures are no longer enough, and people are going to act on those things. And I'll tell you, They say the average age of people entering human trafficking is age 14 to 16. We don't really know that. We think that's true, but if you ask a bunch of 16-year-olds, the average age might be 12 because they were younger. If you ask 28-year-olds, the average age might be 20. We don't really know that. But I will tell you that when our law enforcement does stings, they always advertise a 14-year-old girl. So there's no girl involved, but they'll post an ad that says, this 14-year-old girl is selling herself. Are you interested? And the people come out of the woodworks and they show up in their suits, in their police uniforms, in their pest control trucks. There's no demographic, no race, no age is immune. But 14 years old is an age that they are looking for. So that's pretty scary. I think it's not just pornography, but it's the technology. So used to, you would have to find a time in your day to drive to some seedy part of town, roll your window down, proposition a girl. What if it's an undercover sting? There's a lot of risk involved. There's not a lot of risk involved right now because all you do is you set it up on your phone, you go meet the person. If you drive up and it looks suspicious, you bail. But you set it all up online and it's anonymous and it's easy to do, Someone mentioned earlier Snapchat and social media. These predators are targeting our kids through social media. So what they do is they pretend to be younger than they really are. They send them direct messages. They try to build a relationship. The grooming process takes place over months. And they'll gradually introduce explicit material. And they're talking to, young kids, 10, 12, 14-year-old kids, and they're pretending to be 16 or 18, which that kid thinks is cool, but really they're an adult. They'll introduce explicit material, and then they'll ask for naked pictures. And 2/3 of our kids admit that they've been asked to send naked pictures online, and I would venture to say it's almost 100%, because I would have never admitted that if someone asked me that. When I was a teenager, I would have never said yes. So I would assume it's more than 2/3, and then half of those admit to sending the pictures. And then what the person does is they blackmail them and say, if you don't meet up with me, I'm going to put this online, I'm going to tell your parents. But they intervened with someone recently in Pearl, and the girl's mom discovered what was going on the phone, called the police, and so police showed up to meet the guy who had propositioned her online, and the guy had a black bag, duct tape, and weapons in his car. He was coming to kidnap that child. So, and this was not a child who was poor, uneducated, in a bad part of town. It was just a kid who had social media. Okay, so it's anybody's a target. Our people who are generally targeted are vulnerable, poor, lack of education, lack of family structure. Mom works a lot, single mom who works multiple jobs, those kind of things. But now it's any kid with a phone can be a target.
First off, this is awesome. But my question, if you see something that's questionable, do we immediately call 911? Like, what should we do? Because I sure don't want to be a bystander. Like, I want to do something if I see something.
So she said, if you see something, what do you do? Great question. We have some cards out on our table. Y'all get that. It has the National Human Trafficking Hotline number on it. It's kind of easy to remember if you want to put it in your phone. 888-3737-888. That is the Polaris hotline, and what they do is they have people in every state who they can call on. So your local 911 may not know what to do at all. So we really recommend, now if you see someone being harmed in the moment, you need to call 911. If you have a situation that you suspect is human trafficking, you want to get all the information you can. You got that phone, take pictures. Pretend you're taking a selfie and get the people in the background, whatever you need to do to get any information, license plates, hair color, any information, and report to that national hotline, and they'll filter it down to who on the ground in Mississippi can address that. We never recommend that you take matters into your own hands. Someone messaged me recently and said, I saw this situation, and she said, and I'm so mad at myself, I didn't have the courage to just put her in the car with me. And I thought, well, thank God you didn't put her in the car with you, Their pimps track their phones. So you put her in your car, and now you and your family are going to be a target. So don't put them in your car. Don't reach. You can, if you're in a situation where you can have a conversation and offer them help, maybe, but you really want to get professionals involved. different things to watch for, like if you're in a gas station, someone who steals personal hygiene items in Walmart or CVS or a gas station because they're not being provided those. Stealing condoms and feminine hygiene items are is a common sign because their pimp's not providing those for them. People who don't make eye contact, they don't have any, they don't speak for themselves, they don't have any documentation. So if you're in a gas station and someone's like buying cigarettes or something and they don't have their own driver's license and their own money, someone's providing that for them, that might be a sign. Or if they're in the restroom and someone's standing guard outside the restroom, they don't have freedom of movement. As far as young people and people in your community that you might see, kids who were normally shy or withdrawn or didn't have a lot of money, and they're showing up with expensive bags, their nails done, new makeup. That might be somebody who's grooming them and providing that, buying things for them, and paying to have their nails and makeup done in that grooming process. For kids who are targeted on social media that might be in your own home, you're looking for them to be more withdrawn, spending more time in their room, more emotional and upset because they've got this burden on them now that they're worried about they can't share with someone. Yeah, call that hotline.
Can you give that number again?
Yeah, it's 888-3737-888. And you say it kind of funny to remember it, but and it's on that card that we have out at our table too. You can text it. You don't text that number, but there's like a 6-digit number. So if you go, just Google a National Human Trafficking Hotline, they'll have the number that you can text. I can't remember that off the top of my head. But yeah, you can text that for sure. Oh, okay, good. Question?
What is the law in Mississippi concerning the man that was going to steal the boat? You know, they talked about it earlier. It was just money and somebody paid it. What are we doing now to keep those guys?
So we actually said, what's the law? So we actually have really good law for human trafficking. The problem is it's really hard to prosecute the cases. So say in the case where I talked about where the guy showed up about to kidnap the girl, he didn't actually exchange money and he didn't actually kidnap. So you're only going to be able to charge him with an attempted something. So that's just your regular attempted kidnapping laws. For human trafficking, for minors, it's like 30 years to life if they actually go through with it. And the people who can be charged with that are anybody that has anything to do with it. So it's not just a pimp, but if you purchase sex from of a minor and it's considered trafficking, you could also get 30 years to life. It could also be anyone who aids in that. So they have what they call bottom girls, who is a girl who's been in the life for a long time, and she is in charge of the younger girls. She could be charged as a pimp. If you run a truck stop and you know it happens on your property and you don't do anything about it or you're paid off, you can be charged as a pimp. So all those people can get 30 years to life if a child is involved. The problem is the cases are just really hard to prosecute. Our law enforcement doesn't know how to get the correct evidence right now, and they always want the victim to testify. But the thing is, you don't have a victim testify in a murder case and people go to jail for murder every day. So we need to get our prosecutors and our judges ready to take these cases without a victim because it's extremely traumatic for them, particularly a child, to have to testify. And they're scared of their lives, so they don't want to do that. So we haven't seen a whole lot of cases go through actually under trafficking. What they usually do is charge them for drug possession, weapons, anything they can get them on just to get them off the street. And we support that too. We'd love to see them go to jail for life, but if they get them off the street for any other means, then that's what they have to do sometimes.
How many of y'all have experienced in some shape, form, or fashion through sitting on a grand jury in Lee County or Pontotoc, since we're in Pontotoc, or you are kin to some law enforcement officer or somebody that is connected with Department of Human Services or Family and Children Services that has told y'all human trafficking is right here in your backyard? So I don't have to sell you and tell you that it's here. We just had a grand jury convened the last 2 weeks. There were 4 cases taken before the grand jury in Lee County of human trafficking here. 4 years ago, I would have told you we couldn't even spell it here. It wasn't here. Tupelo and Pontotoc is a unique area because we travel between Memphis and Atlanta, Georgia. And Super Bowl weekend, we made a traffic stop on Veterans Boulevard and I-22. that had 2 male subjects in it in a stolen Yukon. And in that Yukon, we rescued 2 14-year-old girls that was human trafficked, taken over to Atlanta, Georgia, because guess where the Super Bowl was? It was in the new Mercedes-Benz Dome, and that was a avenue for them to support that particular thing. And that's what they do. They congregate around large crowds, festivals and things, and you see more and more and more of that, especially on a local level, because a lot of the people that are in human trafficking are not uneducated, and I'm talking about the ones that produce it, the ones that promote it, the ones that are involved in it, the ones that are getting the kids to get involved. They are not uneducated people, folks. They are very educated and they know how to manipulate the system. A lot of times they are in the system. They are part of the system. Probably one of the most eye-opening experiences I had was I had an opportunity to be a part of sitting down and talking to some individuals about the particular program that is starting here in Lee County for the home. Matter of fact, that home is going to be in my former church. And when I sat down, they said, we'd like for you to come and sit down with some individuals that are going to be helping there and things of that nature. So I went in and I sat down at this meeting, and it was kind of strange because I sat down at this table and there were 2 ladies that kind of sat way away from me over there. And I thought, well, that's kind of strange. We're going to have to holler if we talk across the room back and forth. And you know what it was? Those 2 individuals were victims of sex trafficking, and now they were grown. The reason I posed a threat is one of them was married to a police officer that sex trafficked her. So just my presence in the room was a threat, and I had to build that report up to begin with before we ever even got down to the headache. Another thing I'll tell you is this. The individual here that said child pornography or pornography is the root of this, I will echo that 100%. And I'll tell you why. How many of y'all have ever seen Dateline? How many of y'all, and you go admit your age, how many of you several years ago was infatuated with Dateline when this particular module came out and it was called to catch a predator? And what it was Dateline started on, I'll never forget, it was on a Wednesday night, and they aired a 1-hour segment. And they had connected with local law enforcement in Florida, in California, in some of these big cities. And what they did was they took this home, they took this undercover officer, and he posed as a 14 or 15-year-old child. They put this child online to see how many sexual predators would contact this child for sexual purposes. And I just got infatuated with them catching these people. Well, I really got infatuated when they were catching them for an hour on end. They would catch 4 or 5, and before you knew it, they had to extend this thing to a 2-hour program. And before you knew it, they had it on Wednesday night and on Sunday night. Then before you knew it, they had it on Wednesday, Saturday, and Sunday. And I got to watching them, and you'd see them catch them on Wednesday, and about 3 weeks later, they'd catch the same person 3 or 4 weeks later. And I realized then, my goodness, this is an epidemic. So we, here in Lee County, was the first sheriff's department to pull that same sting. Now, this right here is in your backyard. This is here. I'm not talking about in Jackson. I'm talking about right here in your own yard. So we pulled an undercover sting where we put 2 fake girls, 13 and 14 years old. We downloaded a picture from a church magazine, from a church directory. So I told you that to tell you there was nothing provocative. It was an appropriate picture of 2 young girls, and we made up 2 names. We said they went to school here, one at South Tula, one at Tupelo. And we put them online just to see how many people would contact them. In less than an hour, I had over 70 men talking to these kids for all kinds of reasons. Because I'm telling you, social media is the network of today. We don't do this anymore. We do this. And that's the way society is. There were coaches contacting them about, hey, I see you play softball, where are you going to school? Which was legitimate. But we also had a number of those 70-something that you could tell right off the bat. I show a PowerPoint program. to high schools, to churches, and youth groups. And I show the actual chat log of these sexual predators talking to these girls. And the most amazing thing is I purposely leave the timestamp on there. Because you know what time they're talking to us? 7 o'clock at night, 8 o'clock at night. It's not 3 o'clock in the morning and creepy old people doing this. No, because you know what's going on at 6 and 7 and 8 o'clock at night? Kids doing homework on the computer. And they're connected with them. And they contacted them. Over this 1 year period, we made 47 arrests. And let me tell you where they met us to have sex with these girls. They met us at the Elvis Presley birthplace. They met us at Food Giant in South Tupelo. They met us at Cracker Barrel in Tupelo. And they met us at Home Depot. Now, the reason I did that was, if you remember back and you were watching Dateline, they rented this house or apartment, and they were hidden behind 4 walls. And the guy would contact them. They would introduce themselves. They would ask the child to come over. They would ask, could they come over and visit with the child? And you would see the outside cameras and the guy driving by, and he'd drive by real sneaky like. And he'd always do it at night, and he'd pull up in the driveway, and he'd look around, and all of a sudden he would run in the carport, and then he was in this house. So there was never really visibility of what was going on. So we wanted to change it just to see how determined these people would be to come in broad daylight and meet these kids. So every single place these people came to Lee County, Mississippi to meet this child was in broad daylight, and there was no 4 walls. It was parking lots where you shop each and every day. And we made these arrests. And that is the reality of what is going on here. In sex trafficking today, my wife is the court administrator for youth court here in Tupelo for Judge Bevel. The number of runaway kids in the last year have doubled here. And a lot of it is because they're connected with social media. They're connected with the internet in some shape, form, or fashion. They think there's a better life promised to them for some other than where they're at right now. And so they run away from home, not having any idea what the end result's going to be. And when they run away with this great promise of hope, and a lot of times, it will be another child involved that they connect with that is their age. Let's say it's a 15-year-old girl that runs away from home. She's met this 15 or 16-year-old legitimate. It's not a 30 or 40-year-old posing. It's a 15 or 16-year-old boy that is legitimate, that's cute, that looks good, that promises her, builds up this relationship online, and they agree, hey, Sunday night, right after church, let's meet at Walmart. I've got my grandmother's car. We'll take off. And so they meet, not thinking anything about it. But the secret is this boy may not be involved in somebody having sex with him, but he is making money because he is hired by the sex trafficker to get the girl to have a relationship with him. You see how it's connected? It all connects. And another thing that I tell people is this. People that are involved in sex trafficking and getting these kids involved, don't walk around with a T-shirt on or a light bulb on their head and you can say, oh, there's one young lady, stay away from him. Or there's one over there, stay away from him. No, they work, eat, live, breathe, go to church. Every single day you are around them. I'm telling you, they're here. They're involved. When we did this undercover operation, I kept up with the occupations of these people, these 40-something people that we arrested. They were electricians. They were law enforcement. We had a deputy sheriff drive from Henderson County, Tennessee down here. We had a catastrophic recovery specialist when Hurricane Katrina was on the coast from Michigan that went down there to look and survey land, very educated, that would turn over all the figures to MEMA to figure out how much money that the state of Mississippi was going to get from the federal government. He was using the same computer and the GPS to drive up here and meet one of a 14-year-old girl at Cracker Barrel for sexual purposes. We even, during that operation, found out that they would bring things with them. They brought clothes for the girl to wear. They brought video cameras and cameras to film what was going on. Our 2 children live with a single mother, supposedly, and the mother works, and the child was at home at night. These people would drive up here thinking that this mother was going to be gone for 2 or 3 nights, and this guy was going to stay in your house with your child for 2 nights and take advantage of your child. So I'm telling you that they have got a sick mind, that they will get and do whatever they can to get their victim. Do you know, in the state of Mississippi, the only felony charge that law enforcement, medical people, psychological people, and ministerial people have all agreed and looked at and said, you better mark this person for the rest of your life because they are likely not going to change of this epidemic. When you are convicted of a sexual crime in the state of Mississippi, you register as a sex offender. And you're registered for the rest of your life. You know why? Because when we have a child missing, you know the first place we look? At that list. You can go in a school and shoot everybody in there. And you know what? You'll never be on the list. You can take out everybody here in this room, and you can drink and drive every single day. And you know what? You're not going to be on a marked list that we look at. It's only for people that are involved in sexual crimes because it is a sickness that is beyond describable. And it is a life that is unbearable. Now you ask, how do kids get involved? I'm going to tell you how. I've got a daughter. She's 29 and she teaches school at Nettleton right now. But when Kelly was about 14 or 15 years old, she had the first love of her life. And believe it or not, he was from Pontotoc. That was a mistake to begin with. But he was from Pontotoc. I'll never forget. I was at a church on Sunday night speaking for some event, and Kelly, my daughter, was there, and she was sitting on the back row. And I noticed Kelly and this young man, his name was Grant. Y'all may know him. I'll tell you who it is. It was Grant Warner from Pontotoc. His granddad was a sheriff here. Great people, great family. And if I was going to pick anybody for Kelly today, it would have been Grant, because Grant was a good kid. Hey, they met in church. That's what you want. So they're sitting back there. She's not listening to one thing her daddy says. They're swapping notes. They're doing everything in the world. After it's over with, there's a hamburger fellowship. We go to the fellowship hall. Guess who Kelly sits with? Not Daddy. He sits with Grant. So they kind of have a relationship going on and all for a little while. Well, about 8 or 9 months later, that thing goes south. And then Kelly comes to Daddy and says, Grant has broke up with me. And I said, oh, no. I've never seen my daughter as hurt. I'm going, yes. But she says, and Daddy, he did it by sending me a text message. Y'all, Grant's been missing ever since. But the reason I told you that is this. My daughter was hurt. And it wasn't because she come from a bad family. It wasn't because her dad and mom mistreated her or anything else. She was a little girl that was hurt over her emotions and life not going like it's supposed to. There is so much pressure on kids today. It is unbelievable. And whether you wake up in the Bible Belt of the state of Mississippi, we live in an evil, sick, morally corrupt world. And sin is abound. It's here every single day. And that's why we're where we're at. But she was so hurt, and all it would have taken was the right person to say the right thing at the right time, and she could have very easily been victim. Very easily. So they're all amongst you. They're living in the home with you, victims and everything else. And I can tell you it is prevalent and it is real here. We're lucky that we are one of the host agencies, as she said, that does the training. They actually meet at our office once a month, and it's very encouraging to see where we're going. I applaud Steve and Dave and them for and the volunteers that will be helping and getting this thing going here in Lee County. We're so blessed. When I took office in 2004, prior to that, I was an investigator, and I worked violence against women and children. And some of the and I was glad to get out of it because after about 5 years, it began to wear on me, and I thought I was going to go crazy by just the abuse and things that went on. And what I found out was, here I am sitting here in this room, and this poor child or this lady that has been abused by a male subject in a very long relationship, and some of it was very violent, they would come into my office, and you know the last person they wanted to talk to was another strange man. I mean, that just was not going well. So we hired a grandmother, Miss Donna Franks, that works for me now. Sweet lady, and she works all the violence against women and children, kind of heads up our task force. But we also have got a great resource here with the Family and Children's Resource Center, where we can do the 803 hearings now, where we can get away from what she was talking about. The child don't have to testify in court. We can put them with a counselor, we can video that, and the video can be played in court now, where the child does not have to face their accuser, which has helped a lot. So there are a lot of good things that are going on, but it takes everybody. The sheriff's office and law enforcement can't do it by themselves. But I'm going to tell you the last couple of things I want to tell you is this. What y'all are looking at to be volunteers and the help in this is going to be so crucial. Because I'm going to tell you something. When we stopped this Yukon and we got those two little girls out, we didn't have time to go through no hoopla and no rigmarole and no waiting period and no background checks. We needed help, and we needed it right then. And we did not need to haul them around in the patrol car or anything else. And me and my wife, does anybody here work for Department of Human Services or Family and Children's Services? Okay, she's going to echo what I'm saying here. Here we go. Because the reason I said that is this. There is a very rigorous and strenuous process to go through to become a foster parent. I mean, it's very hard. And our church at First Baptist Church Tupelo, we're big on foster parenting. So me and my wife decided that we wanted to try to help out with foster parenting. And our role was going to be, if you were a foster parent and you as a foster parent want to go on a vacation, or you want a break and you want to let those kids that are in your house go somewhere, they can only go to another foster licensed person. You can't send them to grandma. You can send your own kids, but not foster kids. So you needed foster parents for foster parents. And I thought, okay, we'll narrow this thing down, as myself is, we want this age, we'll take male or female, and we would be the foster parent for the foster parent. So we go through the 11th month training thing. I mean, they inspect our home. I go to the Saturday classes. We take all the tests. They know everything financially about me. They know about my past life, and I still passed. Can you believe that? And everything, but we went through this rigorous thing for about 10 or 11 months. So the last day comes up. We're getting ready to get our license. The sweet lady comes and she inspects our house one more time. She looks at our house. We said, when will we be licensed people? She said, y'all should get it in about 2 weeks. So we were so excited. I got an 8-year-old little boy too. Yes, I got a 29-year-old and an 8-year-old. Jim needs prayer. Okay? But he's so excited because he don't have anybody at home to play with, and he's getting this baby brother or sister for 2 days maybe. So we're excited about it. My wife calls me. She says, y'all didn't pass. I said, what? They said, we can't be foster parents. I said, why in the world can we not be foster parents? And you know why we can't be foster parents? Because my house is upstairs and I don't have a window upstairs. I can't be a foster parent. It's just a rule. Nothing wrong with it. It's a safe rule. Something happens. Kids got to get out. There's no window upstairs. So then I got to thinking, oh gosh, they're going to come take my 8-year-old away because he sleeps upstairs. But the reason I told you that, it's not anything wrong with it, but we need people that can help us right now, today. We can't wait to go through this process. So thank y'all so much for what y'all are doing. And we're putting a window in our house because we're going to beat that system. I tell you, we're going to do that. The last thing I'd tell you is this on a personal note. My dad was a Sunday school teacher at First Baptist Church, Verona, where Anchor Church is right now, for 44 years. He taught upstairs in the education room. I walk in that room right now. And my dad, every single Sunday, Miss Thelma is here. Well, there she is. She was here. She'll tell you. My dad was, to me, one of the most godliest men I ever knew. And I just hope that I am a third of what he is. But my dad prayed every Sunday at home before he ever went to that Sunday school class. And it's my motto in my office today that I hope people that leave my class today are a better person than they were when they come in. That I hope God can use me and he continued to pray that for 40-something years. Well, my dad passed away in 2006 of cancer. He's been gone over 10 years. Do you know that one of the rooms that is being built at the Anchor Church that's going to house women is my dad's Sunday school class. So, as moral and corrupt as the world may be, we serve an awesome God that knows more than we will ever know. And because of that, He is going to reward your efforts. And thank y'all from the bottom of my heart for y'all doing what you do. But just know the problem is here. You're not being trained. You're not being talked about something to prepare for in 6 or 7 years coming down the road. We need you today.
And give me this if I get wrong, because I don't want to. I want to stay within that time frame. But first of all, I felt led as I sat there to tell you, because you've heard a lot about, I'm going to touch on who's vulnerable, but you've already heard a lot about that today. Some really good information on the different ways that young women get trapped and coerced into the exploitation of this industry. But I wanted to share with you just a little bit about how God grabbed my heart for this. I'm a pastor's wife. And so I wasn't that familiar at all with this commercial sex industry, sex trafficking, any of that. And I can remember when I kind of began to get a little bit aware of it, that I would be driving down the road and I'd pass a strip club over here in Memphis. And there was 11 at one time. And I'd pass a strip club and I'd be driving and I'd say, oh, Lord Jesus, do something. We don't need that here. We don't need that here. And then I just drive on back down to the church house, go into my Bible study and leave it and not think about it again until I was driving by. And I think that's what happens so often to those of us that are in, am I walking too much? To those of us who really love the Lord and we really want to serve Him, but we really are we get into a bubble. And what we're doing, and it's important because we do need to disciple young Christians and stuff, and we kind of get in this bubble though, and we forget that there's a dying world out here. I had no idea of the devastation that was going on inside those clubs until I met the first girl that Carol McKenzie, who founded CCW Water Treatment, because I did counseling for her. And I remember walking out into the inner office and she's standing in a corner, cowered, like this. And I walked over to her and I said, "Honey, come on in." And she sat down and she just sat with her head tucked down into her lap almost. And you could tell that she had been abused because she looked young and she wasn't that old. And so as I began to get her story, she was on the street, and that's one of the demographics, and one of the groups that you don't hear about, runaway kids and stuff. They're very vulnerable to this. And she ended up on the street. She was running away from abusive, ended up on the street. And what her story was that this club owner's sister, got it. This club owner's sister. Okay, now you hear me? My husband says, barrel it out, Carol, and I have trouble doing it. I said, honey, you're the preacher. But anyway, this club owner's sister had picked her up and had taken her home with the promise of not having to sleep on the street and hot meals, and that they were going to take care of her. And what he did is he ended up trafficking her. This club owner did. And he would make the dates for her, and she would have to go. And I looked down at her, and I'll never forget this because God just rended my heart with this. And she had scars in her hands, both of them. And I took her little hands, and I leaned over and I said, honey, what is this? And she said, well, if they had the club owner that had me, and his club is now closed, praise God, in Memphis, had a bowl of punishments that he kept on his desk. And if his girls didn't do what he wanted them to do, and he'd made her a date with a guy that had beaten her up badly. She didn't want to go, so she had to draw a punishment out of that bowl. And her punishment was that he took a nail gun, shot her hands with that nail gun. And when she said that, this pastor's wife, this counselor that just drove by a place and prayed, broke. And I just cried, and I took her hands and I said, honey, do you know who has nail scars in his hands, and that he loves you, and he died for you and for me? And I'll tell you what, that rended my heart. And at that moment, God grabbed my heart. I didn't realize what he was going to do with it, because for the first time I realized that precious souls, precious human beings that are created by God with a dignity that nobody has a right to touch, were being exploited, used up, and often murdered. We've had some of our girls that didn't stay through the program, and then we had one just last year. And she was doing well, and somehow she went to the doctor or something, saw a guy, and the guy thinks really worse than the drug thing sometimes with him. And she decided it was time for her to leave. 3 weeks later, they found her dead. And it was a gruesome murder. And she'd been there for several days. And so we helped with her funeral and stuff. But I say all that not just to be dramatic, but try to get you to see that there is a group of precious souls out there, and we need as Christians, we have a mandate to do something about it. That said, I do want to share just a little bit about what we found, and it sounds like to me, just from meeting y'all and talking with you, wow, wonderful programs going on here. So I probably am talking to the choir in a lot of ways. But I just wanted to share a little bit with you about what we found out, and I'm going to do this just to keep me on track and not go over my time. But one of the things that is just absolutely across the board, and we have helped over 630 plus women, and here lately, because we only have 5 beds, I'm just turning away right and left, or trying to find help elsewhere. So I may be sending some to Mississippi. Hurry up. Anyway, sexual abuse is huge. Out of the women that we've helped, 85% of them were sexually abused as children. And that just pre-programs them. It just tangles their little minds up and their little brains up. It steals their childhood. It gets their thinking so convoluted that they mix sex and love up. Sex is love to them. And then they go looking to have that big hole that's left in their heart. And so they're vulnerable to any guy that's going to walk up and say, you're beautiful. You know, you are beautiful. And I see something in you probably nobody else sees. And then they start out as a boyfriend so often. And then they end up moving in with them. And they're real good to them for a little while. And then one day, this is stories from a lot of our women. 2 or 3 days later, a week later, a month later, they wake up and say, baby, we're kind of low on money. You got to help me make the rent. And then he kicks them out. And so it's across the board. It doesn't matter, and you've heard that this morning. They can come from wealthy families. They can come from very poor families. But somewhere along the line, I haven't had one woman, not one of them, y'all, sit down across my desk with me and say to me, when I was a little girl, I dreamed of becoming a prostitute. I've heard a lot of dreams, but never that. And so what's happened to each of these, and you've got to begin to see them as a victim, because what's happened to them is that they begin they began their dream, whatever it was, whether it was to be a nurse or whatever it was, somewhere in their history, that dream got crushed. And their self-esteem and what they thought about themselves became very skewed. And what was more skewed than anything is their view of God. We've had women whose dads were police officers. That was abusing them. We've had pastors. Had one of my women shared about one of her tricks, and she didn't tell me who, and I didn't, and she didn't tell me who, but was a well-known pastor in Memphis. And he'd pick her up, and he would have sex with her and pay her, and then he'd get down on his knees and tell her she needed to repent, and he'd pray with her. When you think about the evil that's in that industry, y'all, there is no way to put a scale on it. There really isn't. And as Christians, we really need to fight against that. One of the things that we found that they need more than anything else when you first get them is they need to feel like they're safe, because they haven't felt safe for a long time. So it's imperative that we have housing. That's why having more housing across the country is so important. And I praise God for what you're doing. So what we want to do is we want to have a safe house. And what I've found over the years, that even if you have a lot of rooms, I really believe that to make that room home, more like a home and more clinical, really means something to them. Because I can't tell you, we've got a little house, and it's really warm and inviting. And so that's one of the things the women have said, because they don't know what they're coming to when I get them a lot of times. And they get so excited because they're in a home. And it's a safe home. And they haven't been in a safe home. And so that's one thing. They do need safe housing. Sometimes they just need money to get home. And this is just a quick story about that. About 2 years ago, we got a call from the Family Safety Center in Memphis. Okay. Had a call from the Family Safety Center in Memphis. And they had this woman, the police had picked up this woman and brought her to them. She'd gone to the doctor, and she got back and she got brave enough to tell the doctor that she didn't want to go home with the people that brought her, because she thought that she was afraid they were going to kill her. And so they called us, and this was about a 34-year-old woman. And when a staff member and I went to pick her up, she came out cowering behind the woman she had talked to there, laid down in the floorboard, the back floorboard of my car, and wouldn't get up. She was so terrified. We took her cell phone and we threw it as far as we could throw it, because we didn't want him tracking her. And all we did for her that night was we got her to the safe house, and she had to even eat her meal, got her a hot meal, because she hadn't eaten in 3 days. Got her a hot meal, and she had to face the door. That's how scared she was. We ran around to the dollar store. That was the only thing we could find open, and got her some clean clothes and told her where the shower was. And she's back there, and we're sitting in another room, y'all. And both my staff member and I just cried because we heard her singing to the top of her voice. Thank God I'm free. Thank you, God, I'm free. Just singing to the top of her voice in the shower. And she came out and she said, Miss Carol, can I throw these old clothes away? I don't ever want to see them again. I said, there's the garbage can. And she threw them away. But what had happened is these traffickers send out recruiters. And she had been recruited in Phoenix. She was working in a hotel, and this couple stayed there, and they befriended her, found out she wanted to be a CNA, said, oh man, Memphis has got a great program. If you want to come back with us, you can take care of our kids and you can go to school. They brought her to Memphis because she believed them. And about 2 days after she'd been with them, they went to the grocery. And what happened is there was a knock at the door. And she goes to the door, and it was a guy they'd introduced her to, a family friend, supposedly. And he said, well, I'll just wait on him. And what he did, he came in, and she's cleaning. She was dusting for him, cleaning the room. And this was a big guy, she said, and he walked up behind her and grabbed her like this, had a rag with something in it, and she woke up chained to a bed and lived that way for 3 years in Memphis, Tennessee. Being traveled at night in a van from house to house, and she said, Miss Carol, these were big, fine homes. These weren't shacks. The youngest girl in that stable, that's what they call them, was 13. And what made this woman afraid is that young girl had tried to run away, and the pimp had brought her back, beaten to a pulp within an inch of her life. He took her out the next night, and she never came back. So this girl thought he'd killed her and said, he's going to kill me. Y'all, that sounds so foreign to think that could go on, but it goes on all the time. So they need to be safe. We've got to provide safety for them. Physical, you've got to take care of their physical needs. You've got, when they come in, we get them a physical because we want to find out what we're working with. Because you're looking at untreated STDs a lot of times. You're looking at cancer sometimes. We've had all this. Hep C. You're looking at liver. You're looking at broken bones, head trauma, dental needs. That's something that was mentioned earlier that's so imperative because most of the time when they're on the drugs, they don't feel a thing. So they don't realize that they've got all these cavities, that they're losing bone, and that their gums are just absolutely being destroyed. And so we have been able, and that's something you can do, we've been able to partner with some dentists in Memphis that give us really, really discounted rates. And then we've got one orthodontist that, bless his heart, he has given us thousands of dollars of just pro bono work. We bring the women in, and he just does it pro bono. Then we've got to look at their mental and emotional needs, because when you think about just the abuse and the neglect, the coercion that they've gone through, you've got to deal with those. And then social adjustment. Because they've been so damaged because of a dysfunctional family of origin, or maybe just from the abuse and the manipulation. They don't trust. They don't know if they can trust anybody ever. So we work them hard in the program. They have lots of classes and stuff. The girls will tell you that. And but what we do to try to help them socially too is we have a lot of fun. One thing we do is we have an overnight retreat once a year, and we take them and we buy up a bunch of junk food that everybody likes, and we take games and a couple of Christian movies, and go over there and we'll take them out to eat catfish, and then we come back and play games and get up the next morning, and the lady that lets us use her home, her husband will come over and take them out in the boat. And they just have a ball. But just to show you how important that is, one of the girls that we took, she had walked out on the deck and the sun was beginning to set. This was a while back. She didn't know I walked out behind her, and I came up behind her and I heard her saying, she's going like this. She said, I ain't never seen anything like this but on the TV, looking at the sunset across the lake. And then one girl that didn't want to go at all, and I said, you got to go, it's part of your program. She was just so disgusted. I said, you're going to go because we're trying to teach you how much fun, good, clean fun is. And so she went, and she came in off the lake. I was sitting in at lunch. She sat down by me, and she says, just like this, stoic. That's the way she was. She said, Miss Carol. And I said, yeah. She said, so this is what you say good, clean fun is? And she just hesitated, and I said, yes. And she went like this. She said, I like it. So they need things that help them adjust socially and learn that social life can be fun and not have to involve drugs or sex or anything like that. Job skills and readiness training, career readiness training is so important. So we have computer classes, resume writing, interview skills, proper behavior, and also we partnered with Miss Lee that's here with her ministry, Renewal Candles, and our women work 2 days a week from 1 to 4 with them, and they've learned to make candles, and they're learning some on-the-job training that way, and also will help give something to put on their resume later. So also, some of our women have gone to college. Actually, we've got one that did her GED, scored so high that she got a scholarship, and that she graduated from nursing school with honors. And now she has her PhD, and she's a nurse practitioner. Wow. So see, God, these women, what I found is that these women have so much potential, and the devil knows it. And he sets out from this high to destroy it. And Christians, we can't let him win. We cannot let him win. And so then, I'm saying this last, but this is the most important thing, and you all know this, is the spiritual. We are unashamedly faith-based. We believe there is no permanent change in a life apart from a growing relationship with the Lord Jesus Christ. So the gospel is shared with every woman that comes in. They need to know about that dignity. They need to know who God is. They don't need to have a skewed view of God. They need to understand mercy and grace. And they need to understand that they are not what they have done or what's been done to them, but they are who God says they are. And don't we all need to know that? Yeah, we do, don't we? So what we're doing here in our program is we're just looking at these gals the way we believe God created them, physically, mentally, emotionally, socially, and spiritually. And we try to hit all those bases with them. And we're a 2-year program, and it takes at least that long to do that.
Well, thank you all for letting me share. This will be my first time sharing my testimony, so I may be reading it because I'm a little bit nervous, and now I'm more nervous now that I see your faces. But, okay, here it is. So I grew up in a broken home. I lived with my grandmother. My mother, she was also into men and addiction, which she's not anymore. But I grew up with my grandmother, and that was really hard on my self-esteem because I really wanted my mom, y'all. All right, in 7th grade, I began using meth. By the time I was in 9th grade, I was introduced to the needle and using it almost to the daily. I went to my first rehab the summer between 10th and 11th grade. I got married at the age of 18 and got pregnant, and not in that order. We had a daughter, but she was born when I was only 6 months pregnant. She was very sick and was in and out of the hospital till the Lord took her to heaven when she was 11 months old. Our marriage became a battleground for cheating, abuse, and a lot of horrible stuff. Drugs and hitting each other was our coping mechanism. But that led me to search out for something more. I went to church when I was 19, and God really started working on my heart. I gave my life to him, but I really didn't know what that looked like. And I rebelled and went back to my old ways as soon as I didn't get my way the first time. So fast forward, after that, I had 3 more children. Okay? Each one of them were taken individually at a separate time because of my addiction and because of my search out for men and everything that it included. I didn't know at that time I was being groomed. And one of those children, to show you how deep it went, she was going through her 2nd round of chemotherapy at 2 years old when I left to get high, and never got to see her again for another 2 years. So I've been to 7 different treatment centers. Before this 2-year program, I had been in 39 months worth of treatments. And I say that to say this. Just because somebody's been to a bunch of programs doesn't mean that next chance won't be the one that helps them. So I would do good for a while and then I'd mess up. It was just a continuous cycle. But each time I would hit a new depth of low. I've been left for dead more times than I can count. And I was in one abusive relationship, and it got to the point I pulled the trigger and tried to kill him, and thank God I missed. And I meant to kill him, though. To release pain, I cut myself. I would try to overdose. I would sit in the bathroom for hours on end trying to find a vein, and I'd get so mad I just started stabbing myself with it. So I worked off Backpage, also used Facebook a lot, but I'd be in motels meeting strangers with absolutely no fear because to die would have been my pleasure. I begged for an end. Sorry, y'all nerves. I've been left on the side of the road and had no clue what town or state I was in. I've had guns to my head and made to do things that are indescribable. The sad part is I convinced myself I liked it. One time I got kidnapped, but when they were done with me, I was sad because I needed someone to love me that bad. I was used and abused, and then I decided they're going to pay for it. They would never get it again for free. Sorry. 15 months ago was the day I will never forget. Of all these experiences, this was the day that changed my life. The police came and got me. I went to jail and they said I had to go to rehab. They sent me to this place called A Way Out. I began to know that God is Jesus is a gentleman. He loves me. He searched me out. He didn't stop. I saw how throughout my life God placed people to be his hands and feet. He works every bad thing into a blessing. My daughter's death brought me and my mother to salvation. Abusive men, now I appreciate God's gentleness. All those treatment programs individually taught me something new and broke me in a new way. It definitely took a lot of pain to get to me. A Way Out didn't look at how many times I failed. Instead, they looked at me through the eyes of God's tender love and mercy. At 14 months into this 2-year program, or I am 14 months into this 2-year program, all my basic needs are met: hygiene, dental, housing, mental, along with groceries, a clothes closet, supply closet. We have Bible studies. On Tuesday nights, we have a Bible study with the staff and volunteers. So I have a mentor that loves me to death. And I can honestly say I think she'll be there for the rest of my life. We have life classes that teach us a variety of skills such as boundaries, healing damaged emotions, codependency, anger, trauma, lies women believe, sexual addiction, mother wounds, searching for significance, and more. But the class that has most influenced my life is Heart of Addiction by Mark Shaw. In that class I learned, it's not 12-step, it's different. But in that class I learned that I'm not once an addict, always an addict. The truth is, I chose to sin. I have a choice to do drugs or not to do drugs. As long as nobody steals me, I've got a choice not to go back to that lifestyle. I have no excuse for sinning, and I'm not an addict, you guys. I'm God's daughter. Yay. It's my choice to continue obeying or to turn back. And I choose to live today. Another aspect to A Way Out that I love is how close we all are. They help me deal with my consequences, which are many. They teach me how to love others, and they show God's love and mercy daily. I have high hopes for the future, and I will soon be spending the night with my daughter for the first time in years. Yeah. I have high hopes of owning a bakery and also mentoring girls and women just like me. I desire to be used by God in many mighty ways. I'm so glad to hear more programs that are like this. Like, it's amazing. But y'all, I want to let you know this. I never saw myself as a victim. Never did. So y'all bringing this awareness is really great. Because a lot of people are ashamed to say that. Because you know, the drugs and all that, you think, oh, that's just a drug addict. But no, that's a hurting little girl.
Okay, so I didn't write a thing because my story is not one that even I can write. I'll relive it with you for the first time. First of all, I want to start from a place of victory and let you know that for the first time in 18 years, I have 1 year sober. That alone, I truly never thought could be possible. I'm 32 years old. I'm from Jackson, Tennessee. Well, I was born in Jackson. We'll leave it at that. From a little baby, there were problems in my family. I learned about sexual addiction, and so that's what we'll call it. Sexual addiction and drug addiction have touched my life in every way you can imagine. From the age of 2 to 8, my grandfather took advantage of me. It's not something that everyone knew. I was so young that not even I really knew. Until my brother went to tuck me in one night and I French kissed him to sleep. You know, good night kiss. So my mother finds out. Then my grandmother finds out. And I can remember even at that young age feeling like I took my granddaddy away from my grandma. The enemy. You're no good. You broke the family up. So I lived with that for a very long time. And I believe that that's what put this self-hatred inside of me that quickly led me to be all about whatever makes me feel better about myself. And I had an older brother, he's 10 years my senior, who gave me all the attention you could imagine. Called me his little sissy. But see, he was in a wheelchair, so I was also called his legs. If he said jump, I said how high. So with an absent father from sexual addiction and a grandfather that's gone, all I had was this brother. And he hung the moon to me. I wanted to be just like him. After a very, very bad divorce from my parents, I was told every detail, by the way. I was spared no truth. Too young to hear these things and about infidelity and just the hatred. My parents used me as a sounding board. It was kind of like, love me more because he did this, and that's worse than what I did. And then when I visited here, I heard the same. I began to believe that nobody I'd ever met was exactly who they said they was, even my own parents. So I wanted to get out of there. I wanted out so bad with nowhere to go. I found myself at the age of 12, my entire reality broken, and no father figure, in the middle of the country with this brother who I thought hung the moon, right? But is now hooked on narcotics from his back being broken. He begins cooking methamphetamine. So me, now being his legs, ran his business. And he had a lot of friends who did meth that never slept, but my brother did. So I was visited very often by his friends. I was used as a eye candy. Hey, you ought to come on over, Sissy's home. Ain't she pretty? Now, at first, they weren't allowed to touch me because I was too young. But as I got older and we got more desperate and we needed more money, my brother's ambitions about his love for me started to kind of dwindle. And then, too, I seen what he was about. So methamphetamine took my life by storm. At the age of 14, I was on IV methamphetamine per, just kind of the trendy thing to do, less residue from smoking and things like that. I was actually taught that it's the cleaner way. So I am recovering now from an 18-year needle addiction, which I chose. Fast forwarding some, when my brother went to prison, that left me needle addicted, broken, no father, a mother sick with various mental problems and lupus, a grandmother on hospice, and I meet this beautiful, beautiful boy at school. I'm still trying to go to school, strung out. And this boy, who claimed to really love me, introduces me to a friend of his, and we'll call him Tang. He was my first pimp. He took me from my grandmother's after serenading my grandmother with a beautiful gospel song. I'll never forget it. It says, change is going to come. He sang Sam Cooke to my grandmother. He packed my bags and he took me to Selmer, Tennessee, where I lived in a trailer with 4 other prostitutes and 2 strippers. I've never shared this part of my story, but listen how the Lord works, you guys, because we're here talking about Mississippi. And whenever I was kidnapped by Tang and kept under the pretense of brand new hairdos, Tommy Hilfiger clothes, and I had my nails done just so-so, within 3 days of eating ecstasy and partying like he was my boyfriend, I end up in the back of a car with 2 other prostitutes headed to Corinth, Mississippi. That was the first place at 14 I ever walked into a strip club, arm in arm with a pimp. Too young to even be in there, so I couldn't dance, but let's talk about grooming. And then mind you how the enemy works. I had 2 movies at my grandmother's that I could watch or choose from on VHS after we lost everything, and I ended up out there. And it was the 10 Commandments and a movie called The Players Club. Has anybody ever heard of it? The irony. And I would literally go back between the 2. And I remember thinking how the girls, you know, this slogan, sometimes you got to use what you got to get what you want. And the enemy began to show me these visions of me dancing. And I was just a little girl. But long story short with Mr. Tang, and if he ever sees this, he'll know who he is. Inside, I still had something that was like, no. I'll sell drugs, I'll clean your house, I'll do whatever. But please not that. And so I begged and pleaded, and I ended up calling my mother after a physical altercation and a very long fist fight with one of the women there at the house because I wouldn't get out and work. You know, this is supposed to be my boyfriend, but now I'm supposed to be working. Long story short, I went home, tail tucked between my legs, and took a couple of years trying to get myself together and maintain a drug addiction, but yet school. And you guys, it just wasn't panning out. So I ended up back in Milan, Tennessee, where I grew up. And that's where I met my little girl's father. I don't want to give too much glory to the enemy or too much time in the past, but I do want you to understand that at that age, even though I had seen what a pimp was capable of, and I've been in the strip clubs and said no, I didn't want to do it, that somehow in my life, this always resurfaced. Because of my drug addiction and my alcoholism, mind you, I was drinking all the time, I could not do life. I could not keep a job. I might get one, and I'm very personable, and it looks and sounds good, but when it came to commitment and being able to show up, I'm hungover, I'm tired, track marks, I'm beat up today, or whatever. I always ended up with someone going, hey, you're sitting on a gold mine. What are you doing, bro? Girl, please. I even have women coming up to me, girl, why you ain't got no new shoes on? You know you could have some. I got so tired of everybody feeling, you know, around me. I wasn't blessed to be honest. I didn't have the body of Christ around me because I had been isolated to people who were trying to press Satan. They were pressing the darkness. And I bought into it. After my little girl's father died. We were together for 4 years. My little girl was 2. He jumped out of my car during a verbal altercation. He was drinking. He died 9 days later. So that leaves me, again, with no man but a child. And desperately, I wanted to keep my baby. But you guys, I mean, it's hard to hold your kid with track marks and not see that something's wrong. When her little arms would come out to me, and it's like, oh, come on, man. Leah, please. And I'd cry out to God all the time, Lord, help me. Please help me. I don't want to live like this. And I begged him to let me keep her. But it just wasn't in the cards. It was best to let her go. And so I did that. My life after losing my child went quickly. I tried to get an apartment. I remember it was a low-income apartment. We talk about if you don't get us into a new environment, they have, I had a hard time staying clean. And that was the case here. But this particular day when I was kidnapped, I needed gas to get my daughter first visit, something of that nature. And I'm at a gas station in Henderson, Tennessee, trying to get home. I had a 3-party check, and the gas clerk was like, I cannot cash this. I'm like, great. Now what I'm going to do? Because I got a swift one. I done put the gas in my car. Now what you going to do? I was like, I'm calling the law. I said, oh, great. So this dripping gold chain caught my eye. Hey, he said, what's wrong, baby? You having problems? I said, yeah, I am. He said, I tell you what, fill her up. He put a $100 bill down. Oh, I think it's the Lord. I should have thought about how many gold chains he had on. Mr. T looking now. Ridiculous amount of gold. And I'm making light because it's just easier for a hard subject. And behind him, following me in the parking lot, was a bottom girl. That's what we'll call it. Normally they use the B word in the street. And she approaches me. She says, darling, somebody look as good as you ain't got no gas money. Here we go again. And it's just, so I don't have nothing. Can't even get to see my own kid. So here goes the enemy. I said, I tell y'all what are y'all fixing to do? Before I knew it, we were just going to share a little marijuana, conversate about life, and I ended up getting invited to drive to big city of Memphis, little old country girl like me. This girl's beautiful. So I get in the car and drive theirs and leave mine. We weren't 2 blocks away when this man looks at me, calls me a B word, and says, don't you know better than to drive a pimp's car? Excuse me? He said, you ain't never coming back. Pull this car over. Right now. I spent 2, maybe 2.5 weeks working my way through hotel room after hotel room. They're invisible chains, y'all. I had a lady trade her life for mine so that I could come home because I hit my knees in front of that pimp and I begged him, spare me. I have a daughter and he'd say, you ain't got no kid. You ain't got no kid. And you ain't got no car. You don't have an apartment. You ain't waiting on nothing. Nobody loves you. Come here to me right now. Don't look at me in my eyes. Have you lost your fucking mind? And I began to be whooped on. He beat me so long I passed out, and my friend girl traded her life for mine. And he brought me back to my mother's and dropped me on the doorstep. Said, if you ever call the law, I know where your mom lives. So, but with that being said, you guys, I mean, if you look me up, if you do a background check on me, I've got a record as long as my arm. And it's from everything for possession of drugs, distribution and manufacturing, every kind of assault you could imagine, because I was mad as everybody. I was whooping myself. I mean, truly. I've lost everything that life has to offer. But I do know this as I stand here today, and I can say it and mean it. I know I'm standing with no record for Jesus. He don't see none of it. Now, I have to remind myself of that because, see, my flesh rose up. I got so mad listening to y'all talk about prostitution like it was a Happy Meal down the street. No, they're invisible chains, and it's like this invisible fence. In all of my, I could see that you guys were living life. I knew that other life existed. I just never thought it could be mine because I was tainted. And I knew enough of the Word of God from living in and out of jail all my life. I knew enough of the Word to condemn me because nobody finished the gospel and told me about grace. But on September 6th of this last year, off of the sidewalk, the Lord came and picked me up with Miss Carol Wiley and her husband. In the flesh, the Lord came. And he picked me up. And immediately, Mr. Sam had to stop the car. He said, I just can't take it no more. At a gas station. And he turned around and said, do you know if you died today, Miss Leah, would you go to heaven? No. Like, I'm a prostitute. I'm a drug addict prostitute. And he said, let me tell you something. If you believe that Jesus came and died for you, fully God, fully man, and that he bridged the gap between you and the Lord, then nothing can take you out of his hand. That's what he said. And it tripped me out because I heard he said something new to me. Nothing can take me out of his hand. And I kept hearing nothing. And then he said, it's a dope room. And I thought, okay. So I began life school. And for the first time ever, it wasn't this in jail thing like, oh, please help me, Lord. It was, oh, please heal me, Lord. Please. And you know, Miss Carol says they sent me to bind up the brokenhearted. I'm still heartbroken. And you want to talk about taking blinders off. Imagine being the blind and everybody else is blinded to you. I had no idea. I don't even know what sex trafficking is. I went to spell it for my boss and forgot the K. No, or was it the C? Couldn't spell it. That's the truth. I have no clue what you guys are talking about, but I lived it. And I'm telling you right now, I left a lot of girls in Memphis when I was kidnapped. And I've got friends in Jackson. I'm stepping way out of all the rules just to tell you guys that God saved my life. And I'm grateful. And thank you guys for caring, because I didn't know you existed. Thank you.
I'm going to be talking about a delicate subject, which is pornography, and suggest to you, from a bit of a pedantic standpoint, because I'm not the expert, I was just a country lawyer, so to speak, in Florida for 35 years before I went to seminary at age 58 and went for 5 years. I'm not ordained. But when I was in seminary, I prayed, Lord, show me how you might use me for Christian, your kingdom work, vocationally. Because otherwise, I have blinders on. All I know how to do is practice law, sue people, draft legal documents, counsel clients, go to court. And that basketball drive and baseball drive, because I played both sports in college, I always wanted to win. And Lord, I don't know how I'm going to win if I step into your Christian vocational circles, because guess what? We're all sinners. So in one sense, we're all losers. But then I thought about what Christ did for us and how he's clothed us with his righteousness. And that righteousness, praise God, makes winners of us all, because we're all going to step inside, be drawn by him into his heavenly city and glorify him and enjoy him forever. That sounds like a winning proposition to me. Well, I come to you today with the assertion. I'll picture you as the jury. I'm a trial lawyer. I did a lot of that for 35 years before I moved to Tennessee. And the assertion is this: pornography drives sex trafficking. And you may not necessarily see the connection. You're a little bit doubtful about whether that's accurate or not. But I want to, hopefully by the end, have you convinced and you render your verdict, and then we've been called to take action, folks. We've been called not to just sit in the back of the pews. We are all brothers and sisters in Christ. We're called to take action and to know what is right to do and what we need to do. And that's no longer to sit on the pews. It's to take action, because we can take steps. We don't have to just sit back and take the pornography that's spewed at us out of Hollywood, out of the movies, out of the publications, the cosmopolitan magazines of the world that pose as reputable magazines, but spew porn, that say their demographic is women 18 to 45, and yet they have on the covers of their magazine how high school girls can have sex on 15 different positions on a school bus. Tell me how that's a demographic aimed at 18 to 45-year-olds. It's a lie. Some say that porn is harmless. I would submit to you that is a myth. In reality, pornography is deeply involved with the exploitation of women and children, and is destructive to its consumers. So I'm going to review some of the literature that talks about this. So I suggest to you that I'm not an expert. I'm just a country lawyer. But there are a lot of experts who have written on this subject matter. The experts point out that porn use fuels the sex trade. Sex trafficking is a form of modern-day slavery, and it's the fastest-growing criminal industry in the world. That's been mentioned today. Sex trafficking is one of the most profitable forms of trafficking. There's also labor trafficking, and it involves many kinds of sexual exploitation, such as pornography, prostitution, bride trafficking, and commercial abuse, sexual abuse of children. The primary way porn fuels the sex trade is by building demand, folks, building demand. Mine would be the first hand to go up and say, did you look at porn when you were in high school and college? Yes. Both hands go up. I was guilty. Guilty as charged, Your Honor. Guilty as charged. And then I came across sections of Scripture that talked about how God intended that a man would be intimate with one woman, his wife. He would know her intimately. He would know the details of her body. Likewise, she would know intimately one person, her husband, intimately. That to go off and commit adultery was a heinous sin. That's one of the commandments, thou shalt not. But then it came to my attention that, wait a minute, the viewing of pornography is coming to know the intimate details of what somebody looks like. That's not my wife.
and women, because women are increasingly looking at porn these days. The statistics show that, unfortunately, 99% of college guys have looked at it, but increasingly now they say, and these are FBI stats and academic studies, as many as 30% of women are viewing pornography also in college. And it seems to be a growing percentage. So, as I realized that viewing pornography is having the kind of intimate knowledge that God did not intend for us to have. And as I realized that, reminded by the Beatitudes, that blessed is he and she who mourns, not just, folks, not just for one who is lost, a lost loved one, but who mourns for their sin. We're called to mourn for the sin that is offensive to the creator of the universe. We're called to do that. And when I became convicted that my viewing of pornography is offensive in the Lord's sight, I started to have a sense of mourning. This is not acceptable. This is not the plan that God had for me. It's not the plan that God has for you. Statistically, in a crowd this size, folks, there are a number of you, I'm not going to ask for hands, there are a number of you who are viewing pornography on a regular basis. I read a book 2 summers ago called The Gospel in Pornography. It took an anonymous survey of 1,000 Christian pastors in America. 57% of the pastors acknowledged that they had accessed pornography over the course of the last year. Of that 57, approximately a third of that, so about 19% all told of the total survey, admitted they were addicted to pornography. When was the last time we heard the sin of pornography talked about from the pulpit or discussed as a topic in a Sunday school class? It's a delicate subject. It's like the 800-pound gorilla in the room. We don't want to go there. It's too touchy. Too many of us are looking at it. We look at it in secret. It's so easy to access. It's so easy to access, but the accessing of it is fueling the demand for sex trafficking. So say the experts. Porn shapes sexual desires. Porn teaches its consumers that women exist for the pleasure of men, and that their purpose is to be degraded and dehumanized for men's excitement. And that they like it, whether they say it or not. They really like it, these women being dehumanized and debased as they are. They really like it. But that's part of the lie. That's the lie from the pit of Satan, the pit of hell. Countless women in porn are there against their will, and they're being exploited. According to experts that write, they write and conclude there's strong evidence that force and coercion are used to secure women's participation. We've heard an example of that in Leah's testimony. The psychological and physical damage is common, and heavy alcohol use and drug use are routine to enforce those who are conscripted into sex slavery. Porn exploits child sexual abuse victims. Porn supports rape culture. These are the assertions made by the experts. Porn hijacks children's sexuality. Trying to skip over some of this stuff, mindful of my time constraints. Porn has proven to be a psychological detriment. Frequent pornographic stimulus, the psychiatrists tell us, changes the neurological makeup in the brain. It actually rewires the viewer's brain, according to the doctors who study the subject. The industry, the pornography industry, fuels the demand for sex trafficking, severely distorts sexuality, and normalizes the degradation of women and children. That's why porn is more than just a private individual act. Some statistics. Remember, I said this was going to be pedantic and somewhat academic, but the statistics show, according to the FBI, approximately 46 million people worldwide are enslaved by human trafficking. Cases have been reported in every country as well as in every state of the U.S. At least 250 to 300,000 U.S. children are trafficked in our country every year. The state of Tennessee, TBI, Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, reports that 94 children a month. There are 95 counties in Tennessee. 94 a month are used in sex trafficking. As was indicated today, a victim doesn't even have to be taken out of their own bedroom. a family friend or a family relative, maybe a dad, maybe a grandfather, comes in and abuses them, they are the victim of sex trafficking. Sometimes that gets filmed and transported across the internet, and people view it and pay money for it. That's why just the possession of child pornography on your computer, folks, violates the federal statute. It violates the definition of sex trafficking involving a minor. Just to have it. Because what it does, it's fueling the demand as people look at it. They have the demand to see more of it. They want to see even more vile degradation, more violent abuse of children and women. Because this satisfies a growing desire to see something even more lurid than what they've already seen. According to the Juniper research in 2017, 250 million people worldwide use their cell phones and tablets to access pornographic content. 250 million. Parents and grandparents, why you're concerned you give your cell phones to your children? Middle school or high school, maybe younger than that, because you're concerned about their whereabouts. Why do they have to have a phone that accesses the internet? Give them a flip phone with no access to the internet. They can call you up anytime. I'm here, Grandma, or I'm here, Mom and Dad. They don't need the phone that has the access to the internet. The internet opens the door to pornography. It also opens the door to social media attacks, as sexual predators are looking for opportunity to establish relationships to come and meet your daughters, your granddaughters, in some cases your sons and your grandsons, and to establish friendships with them and then to come and snatch them. Unfortunately, I did a radio interview on this topic a few years ago, and the interviewer on the Christian radio station made comment to me that his niece, 13 years old, had been lured by a sex trafficker to the Wolf Chase Mall in Cordova, Florida, a suburb of Memphis, a big mall. Come and meet. We've been communicating over social media. Come and meet. Let's meet. I'll buy you something nice, some clothes, get you some ice cream. So she went to the mall, got dropped off, separated from her friends. Mom, I'll be here with my friends from 7 to 10. Pick me up when the mall closes, 13 years old. Guess what? She wasn't picked up. She separated from her friends. They found her body about 2 weeks later. She had been sex trafficked. The Barna Group reports in a survey that 64% of self-identified Christian men, folks, and 15% of self-identified Christian women view porn at least once a month. The Christian community is looking at it. The same Barna survey found that the staggering, and this got mentioned in the book that I mentioned, The Gospel and Pornography, 57% of pastors and youth pastors admitted to a struggle with viewing porn in the recent past. It's no surprise that these pastors don't want to talk about it from the pulpit, don't want to lead it out as a subject for Sunday school. If they're doing it, they're convicted by it, and they don't want to raise their hand as I did. Yeah, I did it when I was in college and high school, folks. I was guilty. I did it. Shame on me, but Jesus Christ covers my sin. Yeah. But the pastors are afraid. They're in constant fear of their secret lives being found out. And they're convinced if they get honest with their elder boards or their trustees, they'll be out of a job. So what's the impulse to why give in to the thought that I should be honest about this particular sin in my life? 12 to 17-year-old boys are the number one consumers of internet porn per Christian counseling today. Porn is a problem, though, for all ages. Pastor Josh McDowell, theologian, has stated recently, a couple years ago, that the number one issue facing the Christian church today, Christian family, is that of pornography. Key points showing the links between porn and sex trafficking. Porn is used as a tool to train young children and women so that they will, quote, know what to do in performing sex acts. Often the forced sexual act between the prostituted woman and child and the John will be filmed and photographed and then shared elsewhere. Studies show that porn users often seek to act out what they have viewed in porn, and if their partners won't engage in the acts, they'll seek it elsewhere. That increases the demand for trafficked women and children to be prostituted. Pimps are operating more and more online as it becomes easier to connect with potential buyers. and to remain anonymous. Popular websites like Craigslist, Backpage have become virtual brothels where one can quickly find prostituted women and children to engage in sex acts. As the addictions to porn increase, users, the psychiatrists note, who study addiction and the pathways to addiction, users seek harder and more graphic material. There's been an absolute boom in the last few years in the availability of live porn, as trafficked women and children are forced to perform on-demand sex acts in front of web cameras as Johns or users watch. Victimless crime, right? Fuel porns the global sex trade by driving the demand into the mainstream of society. American children, and this statistic got mentioned earlier, begin viewing porn at an average age of around 11. A total of probably 90%, one survey estimates, 90% of kids between 8 and 16 have viewed porn online, and many are becoming addicted to freely available internet pornography. The effects of porn are powerful on their developing brains, according to the clinical psychologists who study the issue. So the porn industry is estimated to be a $99 billion industry worldwide, with child porn taking in at least $5 billion, it's estimated, 5%. And guess where the leading country for viewing child pornography is? The good old US of A. Guess where, according to the FBI, guess where most of the child porn is filmed and broadcast? The good old US of A, folks, our beloved country. Child porn is one of the fastest growing online businesses. So the link between pornography and human trafficking. The Freedom Youth Project Foundation reports that thousands of trafficked children and adults are forced to make pornographic films. As well, those addicted to pornography eventually lose satisfaction with just watching sexual encounters and seek encounters with trafficked persons. An estimated 40 to 50% of consumers of child pornography will eventually abuse and molest a child based on the fact that they've been viewing, and simply viewing is not enough. Now they've got to go act out and act it out and find somebody who they can compel to act out. So understanding that pornography and sex trafficking are interconnected challenges us to seek justice for victims of commercial sexual exploitation. We have to acknowledge, folks, that pornography is a root cause, one of the, certainly not the only, but is one of the strong root causes for contributing to sex trafficking, and we have to demand justice for those who are victims of it. We can no longer afford to just sit back in our churches in the back row and decide, well, it's so big a problem, what can little old me do about it? Folks, we can get involved. We can get involved. The article that is co-authored by Ken. I can't read. At page 19, excuse me. And I encourage you all to get the American Family Association Journal. The October issue features our little 4-staff ministry in Memphis. Community Citizens for Community Values and the Way Out. But page 19 has a very dramatic map. And you all have a copy of this magazine, I understand, in the handouts, bags that you received. At page 19, it shows the 15 states and counting that have declared porn a public health crisis. 15 states, folks. Mississippi's not one of the 15. I encourage you to talk to your state legislators, your county commissioners, to adopt this resolution. I've got several more copies of it if anybody's interested in a copy. The same version, virtual version of that resolution, which declares pornography is a public health crisis in our state. We need to allocate resources to deal with it. We can no longer just sit back. It's having dire consequences on families. It's causing marriages to come apart. It's causing addiction issues for children. Especially boys are not forming proper relationships and understanding of women. And they've got the wrong idea of what it means to be in right relationship. And it's certainly ungodly. So the resolution calls for action to be taken by the states. We can no longer sit back and just take it. And then we need legislation. So I encourage you, have your state legislature adopt the resolution that declares pornography is a public health crisis. And it leads directly to sex trafficking, and so says the language in the body of the resolution. Folks, you can do something about this. We don't have to just sit back and take it. Be involved with ministries that are focused on providing more safe housing. Be involved with programs that want to deal with the sensitive issues, the difficult issues, the tough issues that deal with women like Sandra and Leah. And they're open to them and want to hear them. Not because they were involved in prostitution, not because they're heinous or gross, sinners that you don't want to get your hands dirty with. No, but because they're made in the image and likeness of the creator of the universe, who loves us, folks, who loves us. Get involved with programs like that. It's going to make a difference in your community. Thank you so much, Pastor David, for the program you're starting in this community. It's overdue. With only 600 beds in this country, we have so much need in this country, and there are so many victims out there. Between 250 and 300,000 folks, kids a year, FBI stats. And we've got 600 beds, which are probably mostly for adults. We don't have enough facilities to take care of the children. Folks, there are crying need. There's crying need out there. You as Christians can be involved. You don't have to feel like you have to sit back and take it. Get involved in your community. Start to ask questions. Send letters to the editor. Call organizations. Call your local police. Ask, how can I be involved with being an eye in the community for what's going on and what the trafficking that's underway. Start to attend police community meetings and raise the subject matter about what we can do as a community to be more aware of this horrible evil that exists. We don't have to just put up with this, folks. We're called to be active. We're called to occupy until the Lord comes back. And that's one of the ways we can occupy if we're motivated. There are a lot of sins out there, a lot of evils that we have the opportunity to allocate our time and our resources to. But if this is one that moves on your heart, and I take it by the fact that you're here today, I invite you to take action steps. Wisdom, the Greek philosophers talked about wisdom. What was the end result of wisdom? Was it for the acquisition merely of knowledge? Plato and Aristotle took that subject up in 400 BC Athens, Greece. No, the end of wisdom is not just to collect information and knowledge. It's to let that information and knowledge move from your head to your heart and cause you to act for a just cause. Let it cause you to act for a just cause, which is also acceptable in the Lord's sight. So, there's an action step for you, Mississippi. Another resolution that can be pursued is one that Tennessee is the first state to have taken it up. And I'm humbled by the fact that I had the privilege to put into the hands of a state representative in Memphis a resolution called Safer Internet for Children. And what it does, I'm a lawyer, so I'm happy to see language citing U.S. Supreme Court law cited in the resolution. The resolution acknowledges that pornography is not protected speech under the First Amendment of the Constitution. Thank you, Ann, for that quote in the recent article, in this article, all of which is, you have it. It's not protected free speech. The Safer Internet resolution calls for the internet service providers, the Comcast, the AT&Ts of the world, make them develop the technology that disallows minors from having access, the ubiquitous, freely available, and easily obtainable access to hardcore pornography that they now can get on their cell phones. Why do they need those cell phones in the first place? I keep coming back to that thought. Internet access on their cell phone. All they need is a flip phone. But anyhow, Safer Internet for Children puts the burden on the internet service providers they will no longer, if this is adopted as law, they will know Tennessee's taken a step in that direction. First state in the nation, the Tennessee House adopted it. It's going to the Tennessee Senate in January. I'm working with some Tennessee state senators. It didn't get to the Senate until the last week of the last legislative session, so they didn't have time to consider it. So I'm working with some state senators now to push the ball forward so that they will take it up when the Senate reconvenes in January. We're excited about the prospect. It passed 92-0 in the Tennessee House. It requires the internet service providers to no longer allow pornography on the cable TV or the cell phone. Instead, if you're an adult, we don't want to deny your First Amendment rights. That's what the internet service providers say. Well, adults have freedom of speech. They should have access to this. This is part of open and free America, right? Okay, well, fine. If you want on your cell phone or your cable TV pornography, then you, one, demonstrate technologically that you're an adult, and two, that you affirmatively want to opt into receipt of pornography on your cable TV or your cell phone. This, again, I'm not an originalist. This is what the nation of the United Kingdom did, folks, in 2014, and they developed the Digital Economy Act in 2017, and they have now required that their big internet service provider, Sky, with 30 or 50 million customers, developed the technology, and you know what they found out? That it cost 1 cent per customer per month. 12 cents a year? There was testimony, and I'm sorry I couldn't be there. I've been working with the National Decency Coalition out of Nashville and Concerned Women of America and National Center on Sexual Exploitation out of the Washington, D.C. area. But none of us could be there for the House discussion when the representative of Comcast showed up in the room, and she said, she had the audacity to say, it's going to cost a lot to develop that kind of technology, and we don't want to have to pass that cost on to our customers. Had we been there, we would have the evidence, 1 cent per month per customer. Give me a break, Comcast. And guess what? We will be there in January when they come to make the same arguments to the Senate committee in Nashville. We'll be there this time. So folks, that's something you can urge upon your state senators and your state representatives as well. 2 specific suggestions for you. So Mississippi, get involved. Folks, get out of the pews, get active, take the steps that you know will be pleasing and acceptable in our Lord's sight. And let it be said, as you stand on the entryway to the heavenly city, Lord, it's all about you. It's because of you clothed me with your righteousness. It's for nothing I did. But then as the Lord starts to consider, enter into my heavenly city where I have prepared a place for you. And then he starts to accord the crowns for his saints. Lord, none of us are deserving of that. But let us be active, encouraged by your Holy Spirit to take the steps that we can take as concerned citizens and concerned and loving Christians for those who are being abused and exploited. And with that, I thank you. And hopefully you've seen and understood the argument for why sex trafficking and pornography are linked. Be in prayer about it and about how the Lord can use you to come against that great evil, that great wickedness. Thank you.
Well, after just being in this room, the only thing I can say is I'm heartbroken. I have a wife that I love, that I cherish. I have 3 kids that I would do anything for. I have 2 little foster kids whose mother said a similar past. And I'm just a simple carpenter. That's it. But my blinders are off. And I'm not going to sit in a pew anymore. Thank you for what you do. Thank you for what you do. I'm going to do what I do to make sure that there's an end to this. And as I look around and I see Ricky Gaines, when a trailer needs to be taken anywhere in this country to deliver equipment to set some girls free, that man's going to jump in that truck and he's going to take it. When the email needs to be put together, Chandler Gurley's going to do it with excellence. Because this has got to stop, and it's got to stop now. We can't stand around and go to church every Sunday and feel good about ourselves. Ricky and Glenda have stepped up. He was going to play golf. Okay? That was his retirement plan. How much golf have you played so far, brother? It's time for us to step up. I sat in my office this week. I thought, what am I going to share? So I started reading this word, and I knew where I was going. I walked to Chandler's office, and I knew where I was going, and I sat back down, and I read some more, and the Lord said, that's not what you're supposed to share. So he directed this. And as I read through Nehemiah, that's what I'm going to read today. Nehemiah. There's so many parallels to what was going on there and what's going on now. So let me read Nehemiah. I'm going to read two different passages. Nehemiah 1, 4 through 7. When I heard these things, I sat down and I wept. For some days I mourned, I fasted, I prayed before the God of heaven, and we all need to be doing that. Then I said, Lord, the God of heaven is the great and awesome God who keeps his covenant of love with those who love him and keeps commands. Let your ears be attentive and your eyes open to hear our prayers. Your servant is praying before you day and night. I confess the sins of Israel. Men, we are the reason that this happens. We are the reason that this happens, and we need to confess our sins, get on our hands and knees, and ask him to forgive us. We have acted very wickedly toward you. We have not obeyed your commands, your decrees, and your laws that you gave Moses. We can't stand by in this nation and allow this to happen. We have been praying as a staff, as the ministry of 8 Days of Hope. We've been praying, and now it's time for us to put our boots on and do something. Later in Nehemiah 4, this is when the action takes place. Therefore, I stationed some people behind the lowest points of the wall and the exposed places, posted them by family with their swords, spears, and bows. After I looked things over, I stood up and said to the nobles, the officials, and the rest of the people, do not be afraid of them. You don't need to be afraid of those men anymore, because we're going to stand up and we're going to protect you. Remember the Lord who is great and awesome, and fight for your families, for your sons, for your daughters, for your wives, for your homes. When our enemies heard that we were aware of their plot and that God had frustrated it, we will all return to the wall, each to our work. From that day on, half the men did the work, while the other half were equipped with spears, shields, bows, and armor. The officials posted themselves behind the people of Judah who were building the wall. Those who carried material did their work with one hand and held a weapon with the other. And each of the builders wore his sword at his side as he worked. But the man who sounded the trumpet stayed with me. Then I said to the nobles, the officials, and the rest of the people, the work is extensive and spread out, and we are widely separated from each other along the wall. Whenever you hear the sound of the trumpet, join us there, and God will fight for us. God has given Steve a vision. Our vision, this ministry's vision, is to set these girls free. Amen. And we are going to sound the modern day trumpet. We can send an email and everybody will get it. When you get that modern day trumpet sound, will you step up and do what God has called you to do? I've been traveling all around this country, and I had no idea I had my blinders on. I've been to Indianapolis and met with the ministry there. I've been to Houston, and I met with the ministry there. These girls are 11 years old. These facilities have little girls. I'm a simple carpenter, but I can do it. I can do what God has gifted me with to end this. All he's asking you is to use the gift that he has given you to do his work and to set people free. Amen? Heavenly Father God, I love you. Please forgive us. God, use us. You are awesome. You're amazing, God, and I know that you will fight our battles for us, Lord. So we're asking you and we're telling you that we're ready. We know you'll go before us. Convict us and show us what you want us to do, Lord. Our answer is yes. We love you. In Jesus' name. Amen.